I don't know.
Yeah.
26 on, so we're gonna get started in about 2 minutes. Morning, everyone. Morning, everyone on Zoom. Getting started here on day 2. We're going to follow pretty much what's on the original agenda, and we'll go from there. But just to start things off, I figured I'm going to share the PowerPoint. All right, so just starting off, we covered a lot of topics yesterday, so the first thing we can do is just recap kind of what we went over. And if anyone has questions that came up last night or this morning, or there's other comments or follow-ups, this would be the time to kind of bring those to the table. So we went over yesterday the new staff that's in landowner and Access and Landowner Relations Bureau, as well as FACB that are working in trail grant funding. Went over the Parks and Outdoor Recreation Division, vision and goals. Talked about the new communications approaches that we're taking with trail funding opportunities, and also the increased marketing effort we're doing with our ComEd department. Then we got into the eligibility across RTP and trail stewardship. Kind of did a deep dive on that. And I think the goal there was to just clarify the differences in the programs, primarily based on eligibility of project category and work. I was also procurement. Then we talked about the upcoming grant cycle that will go live in November, with RTP starting November 1 and running to the end of January, and trail stewardship starting November 15th and running to the end of January. Talked a little bit about the technical assistance training that's going to happen this fall to help applicants work through the new application. Then we talked about the updates to RTP, STAC's increased role and in the involvement of review in the spring, And then we ended the day by talking about how to best start figuring out and brainstorming a way to make sure that both programs are complementing each other when it comes to the approximate $3 million a year that's allocated and awarded to trail projects across the state, across both programs. So is there anything within yesterday that folks want to revisit? Any questions, any comments?
We discussed, you talked, we talked a little bit throughout the day about the outreach that's happening, that will be happening. And you alluded to that we would be going into that a little bit more. I'm not seeing that on today's agenda, or
It's kind of tucked in. I mean, I think it's tucked in pretty much right away.
okay. Right away. Is it now?
Yeah. Here we go.
Very good. Oh, I apparently am. Myself.
So I have a copy of this slide for everyone, if you just want to mark it up and take notes, and just so you have one in front of you. So, yeah, one of the first things that I did back last May, this past May, was to do a program inventory, which was pretty straightforward. We've got 2 cycles, and so just going through the program inventory, a lot of what we talked about yesterday was the start of that inventory, was eligibility requirements, application steps, what documents are needed, what does the budget look like, project narrative, and things like that. And we'll go over a lot of that as well as the scoring criteria. But first, I think it's just important to kind of look at what we have across 2021 and 2022 and identify some patterns and also identify the big gaps that exist. So if we just focus first on the 2021 project summary, we had 41 total projects, and roughly about 5 of those have closed up. So we've got about 36 of those projects still in play. So the vast majority is still going. In terms of who was awarded in terms of organization type, NGOs were the clear majority there, with over 60% going to NGOs. And I think if we're just trying to understand that, potentially that user group was the most involved and the most aware that trail stewardship was a new program, and they were ready to go and apply right away. We have local government and federal governments both at 15%. State government, that was FWP, we had 4 projects that were going. One of them is closed since Madison Buffalo Jump. That trail work has finished, and that program and the project's completed. And then the 3 other are really got kicked off this spring, summer. And then we received no applications from tribal governments. When we look down at project type, it's actually a pretty nice array. So there were a fair amount of trailhead improvements, trail rehab, a good amount of backcountry, some new trail construction, which is great because I think right now the demand for trails in the state is huge, but the supply is not. I mean, it can always increase, and so trail construction projects are big and an important part of this trail stewardship program. Volunteer and workforce development, that was kind of categorized as such and such organization is applying, and the money's going directly to a seasonal trail crew, or it's providing the Bob Marshall Wilderness, for example, the resources to bring a volunteer trail crew and feed them and get the pack stock and get them back into the backcountry. Snow trail improvements were also there were 7 projects there, so really even spread across that. And then trail signage, there weren't any. And so before we move on to 2022, are there any thoughts or questions just about this breakdown of the first grant cycle that came out?
It's amazing information.
And so, and I think the thing with the way, if you look at project type, it just so happened that they spread that evenly. There was no rhyme or reason to it, but it just worked out. And I think as we move to 2022, you see that that spread wasn't the same the next year. And so something we can talk about today is where do we want that spread to go and how can we kind of engineer or encourage project types to be, you know, as diverse as the 2021 application cycle, which was a first go around, and I think it just happened to work out that way. And but really that's a representative distribution of project types.
Quick observation, so 2021 would have gone in kind of pre-COVID shutdown, right? Wasn't that, the deadline would have been just before the main shutdown? Did everybody
Well,
remember through?
no. Because
Was it or?
COVID happened in March of 2020.
2020.
Yeah.
20, so it would have been March.
Right.
Okay. I was just trying to figure out if that affected 2022's lack of construction projects.
So I know
Possibly.
2022, we funded everything. How much, what percentage was funded in 2021 of applicants? I mean, we funded all the eligible applicants.
I don't.
I mean, was it similar? It was probably.
It was close. I seem to recall there was a few that got.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure, but I don't think it was I don't think there was a huge group of people that just were not awarded. There might have been 2 or 3. That was probably an eligibility.
Right, yeah. I thought there were 2 or 3. Yeah, I feel like there was 3.
I think it was
that were ineligible.
This is Alice. I have a question.
Yes, Alice.
I noticed that last year, no state or tribal, and then the year before, no tribal. Do you think that maybe part of that? I remember 3 years ago, we had a tribal application. I don't remember if it was, I don't think it was awarded, but is there something that we can maybe make sure that we're getting out to the tribal government so that they know either how to better apply or to apply at all, so that it would be kind of nice to hit that sector?
Yeah, absolutely, Alice. I've started talking with FWP's tribal liaison, Quinn, and her and I are going to continue to talk throughout September because a lot of our communication from the division in the bureau to tribal governments will always go through our liaison. And so she's started identifying potential projects that are already in play on various reservations across the state. And she's also going to give me contacts so that when I am on the road, I will be able to stop in. Folks will be expecting me, and then I'll hand over information that says, you know, here are the eligible projects. Here's the application process. We have technical assistance training in the next month, and really try and do targeted outreach because there's a lot of potential trail projects that can happen on tribal lands, and I think there's a big push right now to bring people onto reservations to understand the cultural significance, and trails are a big part of allowing people to experience that and allowing tribes to tell their story. And so we do have some targeted outreach that's going to initially be channeled through our liaison here.
I would recommend also the tribal liaison in the Department of Commerce and Tourism. We were just yesterday talking about a project that's a campground, Northern Cheyenne. And I'm not.
Hey, Brenda, it's a little hard for us to hear you. Could you speak up a little bit more?
Yeah, so I was just recommending that also invite the tribal liaison from the Department of Commerce and Tourism, because there's a project, a campground project I know going on right now in Northern Cheyenne, or starting.
Okay.
And she would, between those 2 liaison, I think you're going to have some really good results.
Yeah, because I have to assume there's projects waiting to happen or already in progress, and trail stewardship can be a new funding mechanism that's right there and right.
I do remember that one that Alice was talking about, and as I recall, there was a big question mark as to whether or not they understood that they had to spend the money first before they could apply for reimbursement. It was a large RTP grant where we invited them in, get the large ones in to give a presentation. And it was a great presentation. I thought it was a good project. There was a lot of question as to whether or not they actually had any money to get going. And they were going, there was a gentleman, part of FWP or something, that was gonna go talk to them. But I never heard as to whether that project got going.
One other, along with commerce, another recommendation is Misty Cool, who is the governor's office, and she travels to the reservations extensively. And what I would do is just set up a meeting with her, give her the information, and as she talks to people and it comes up, she'll drop the pamphlets, give them your card, and she's a phenomenal spokesperson and really well respected around the state. And she's great about trails, health, and all of that.
Great. And I think, yeah, once as we get this hard copy materials out of our comment department too, it'll be a lot easier to meet with either liaison specifically and hand over all that material. And then allow them to champion the program. And then on the road, setting up meetings through the contacts, whether it's Department of Commerce, the governor's office, or our own travel liaison. So, yeah, let's have just a conversation about how the program works and how it could fit into your needs. And so that's something that's going to kick off this fall. And then I think by next cycle, we'll have a pretty well-oiled channel of communication back and forth.
Just a quick question, are the tribal economic development organizations, are those considered, do they fall under the category of tribal government or NGO?
I'm unclear, but that's something I think our travel liaison will be able to clear up right away. But school districts would also work. Because I know Browning Community College is working on a multi-use track around the campus. Someone's already mentioned this to me. And so if this is a potential program where if they need to get across the finish line with some funding and they already have a project that's 70% finished, something like that, and then getting the community college involved would then not only be a great way to promote the program, but a great way to promote trails work. Because I think the trails workforce too is something that somehow 10 years ago, I couldn't get a job on a trail crew, and now no one's accepting the jobs. I just don't understand. So building a workforce is also part of the promotion of this program as well. Anybody else on Zoom have thoughts on the 2021 project summary information? Okay, we'll jump to 2022, and everyone online, please chime in whenever something comes up. Just speak up. That would be great. So now we move to last year's cycle, which was graded in the spring and awarded this July. We had less applications. Oh, and there was also the motorized breakdown of 2021. We had 30% and then 70% non-motorized. 2022, we had less applications, which I think is interesting. Not sure, I don't know if we can truly figure out why that is, but I don't think that'll be the case for 2023. I think the way things are going, we'll bring in a fair amount of applications. I'm hoping over 50. This year, the motorized allocation was 43% to 57% non-motorized. We also allocated over $300,000 more, and that can be explained through the recreational marijuana tax revenue that came in, I think, after the stack even met. So that came into sometime in May, which was a hugely added bonus because then it allowed all projects to get 100% funding, which is great because I think leaving the stack meeting on April 7th of last year, projects were only lined up to get 75%, which from a programmatic standpoint I don't know how that would have involved so much extra correspondence and communication to say, hey, congratulations, you've been awarded, but you've only been awarded 3/4 of the money. How do we want to, we would have had to rewrite every project plan, the summary budgets, the amount of work that would have had to go in, because folks are applying for 100% funding, and having to go back and reduce that by 25% would involve so much administrative paperwork. And I think it would also just be confusing for grantees, because people don't apply for grants to get 3/4 funding. They apply for grants for what they're asking for. So that won't be the case in the 2023 cycle. And luckily it wasn't the case this year, but I think it was by chance and by the fact that tax revenue came in the 11th hour. But breaking it down in organization type, NGO is still a large chunk of the pie there with 56%. Even though it was 25 to 18, there were 9 less projects. So nonprofits are aware of the program, they're applying, and they're being awarded because of that. Local governments stayed at, it actually increased this year to 19%. And then the federal government increased 10% up to 25%. State government, there were no applications, no awards, and again, tribal government, no applications, no awards. And so we talked about the targeted outreach for tribal governments. And then looking at project types, trailhead improvements was down to 9%. Trail rehab was down to 12%, but that's not a huge jump. Backcountry bumped incredibly high. Part of that explanation, I think, can be tethered to the federal government. Those are 8 Forest Service projects that are all backcountry. So that's, part of it. And then there were 6 other projects that were backcountry, and I think most of those could be associated with nonprofits, partner organizations of federal public lands. No trail construction this year, so we went in the opposite direction there. Volunteer workforce development was up, which is great. Snow trail improvements was down slightly, and trail signage, we got 1. So there we go. But I think as we look at this and talk more today, the question is, which project, what do we want this project outlay to look like next year, and how can we encourage that to happen? We're not going to be able to engineer the exact project type breakdown as 2021, but how do we encourage more trail construction projects? And part of that will be outreach this fall, and part of that will be going back to our own communities and finding organizations that either are thinking about building a trail or we believe has the capacity to build a trail, and then encouraging them to put a project like that together. So before we move to the regional breakdown, any comments, questions on the 2022 summary?
Yeah, I think you're always going to see some variation.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't get too wrapped around the axle on it. I mean, in the 4 years I've been here, we see lots of different types of projects come through. And I think, when you've got 10 years down the road, you're going to have this really nice spread that's going to look really average across all of them, and you're going to be very happy. So yeah, I just say, don't get too worried about, 1 year that one of them's a 0. It just is what it is. So yeah.
But one, I think there was
And construction costs went through the roof over this last 2 years. So, yeah, a lot of people may just be hanging back going you can't even get a dump truck right now. So you can't pour concrete, you can't do anything. Concrete is booked to the end of the year. You wanted a piece of concrete for a slab, guess what? You're not getting it. So you're just not going to see those projects until that frees up.
I mean, trail construction also just involves an MCC crew and some ranks digging tread as well. Alice, I see that you're unmuted. Do you have something? So figuring out a way to just encourage new projects that we want to see will be something. But then moving to the regions, This pretty much speaks for itself here, and these are the projects across both 2 years.
Can you explain
Yeah, I
where these
don't know.
regions
Yeah,
are?
yeah.
We don't like automatically know.
Oh, that's the slide I didn't create, which was the map. Okay,
Yeah, of
so
course.
region 1 is.
Hey, Tom, I'll grab a map online here and share screen if you want.
Yeah,
Actually, well, Hope does that. I have a question that's probably more for Beth and Hope. On trail signage, well, actually anything, where would the new Lower Yellowstone River Trail fit this? For example, could FWP within itself apply for trail signage money for the Lower Yellowstone River project? Hope, you want to take that one?
Sure, the answer is yes. So we have trail signage out for the project now. I don't know if you've seen any of those, Brenda. They look great.
Oh, I'm not.
Okay, so we've got them out. I'll dig out a photo I've got too and share that. But yes, FWP is eligible to apply for projects. We did in 2021. We didn't last year. I would like to anticipate that we will this year. We want to be very thoughtful about how we apply and what we would prioritize to apply to the program. So I appreciate your consideration of that, but we have funded the trail signage already for that Lower Yellowstone Water Trail. Hey, Tom, can I steal the screen share from you?
yes.
I'll show you the administrative region photo and then, or the map, pardon me. And then, so there's the administrative regions there, and then I'll dig out this photo and shoot it over to my email so I can show you an example of the trail sign. But any questions on those regions and how they break down?
So regional headquarters in region 1, Kalispell, region 2, Missoula, region 3, Bozeman, region 4, Great Falls, region 5, Billings. And then Beth, you're gonna have to help me out with 6 and 7.
Glasgow, region 6 and 7 Miles City is the. A lot of potential for region 6 and 7 and 4, sure. Yeah. Especially in working with the tribes.
Mhm.
Yes, it'd be great to see a lot more applications from those 3 regions in particular.
Mhm. And region,
And-
speak. Go ahead, Lou.
Oh, no, you go ahead, Tom.
I was just thinking of the Lower Yellowstone and all the communities along that's region 7. And so, communicating with Foresight or reminding them that this program exists and there's already a big push to bring recreation along the river, asking them what trails work, asking Miles City what trails work. Starting to combine these large initiatives like the Lower Yellowstone and then allowing communities to also find a way to build something that complements that infrastructure that's going in is particularly a big opportunity in region 5 and 7.
Another thought I've had, I just found that photo. I've got to just get it over to my email. But in the conversation about communicating with the state tribal folks, I'm going to see if we can get permission to get Tom in front of the State Tribal Relations Committee. That committee of legislators meets September 9th and is a really great way to spread information like that. Just for awareness, those tribal leaders that are state legislators really can help get the word out. So Tom, I'll inquire about the opportunity to do that. And then the State Tribal Economic Development Commission just met in Great Falls last week and got a really good contact over there in relationship with those folks. So I think it would be very easy to reach out to them and get this information incorporated in a future meeting and presentation. And Quinn Kuka, our tribal liaison, has a great relationship with Misty Cool, and I've worked with Misty as well too. So I'm confident, Ginny, and that's a good suggestion to use Misty as a resource to help spread information. We've been talking about as Quinn travels the state and helps share information in addition to Tom's travels, but Misty's another great suggestion. So here comes this river sign. Finally got my act together here. There we go.
I feel like we need a drum roll.
What was that?
And we need a drum roll. We're all like.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, bated breath. Here it comes.
Aw.
So this is at Rosebud East. And I don't have the other photos to share you from the day I walked around the site, but so this is facing in from the shore. As you look out, there's a nice dock there, and there was a family hanging out in the picnic area as I was there that day. So in any case, and then, so they've got these up and down the trail. I just hats off just to toot the horn out there in Region 7 a little bit. They've done such a great job championing this and getting all the pieces in place. Let's see, oops, what did I just do? Here we go. I can't say enough great things about the level of work they've put into this. Jamie Hould and Brian Berkey have been leading those crews. Brian Berkey is our regional recreation manager out there, and Jamie Hould is our regional maintenance manager. And they've tag teamed all of this effort between themselves and their teams, and with Brad Schmitz, the regional supervisor, and Marla Prell, the information officer out there. They've just done a great job and got that rolled out. So those signs were up. We got delayed a little bit by the flooding season, which we decided we didn't want to promote more river use during those high flows. So we waited until the waters came down, and then that launched mid to later July when things were feeling a little bit better. So.
So that's part of kind of the regional breakdown, and also how this targeted outreach can align with what's already happening in FWP at the Lower Yellowstone. And then also talking to communities about, how would you want this to work out? And do you want it to be a project that is kind of a public health thing that's for healthy communities to get people out and to get people together? Or does this also kind of want to be part of your economic development plan to get people off of the highway, to keep them in town for a little bit longer, and then to allow them to realize that there's opportunities to stay and spend money and potentially even stay the night? I mean, there's some research out of Headwaters Economics, and then the Institute of Tourism and Recreation Research says the longer you keep people in town, the more money they'll spend, and trails are a great way to get people staying in town for 45 an hour and a half longer than they would have if they had just stopped at town, pump, filled up, and kept going. And so figuring out what communities do want to keep people in there for the economic benefit is kind of part of the angle to say, well, great, here's an opportunity. Here's how, it worked somewhere else. We're not going to be able to just plug it in here, but let's start a conversation about how this could benefit you.
Just another comment about some of this targeted outreach, and really glad to see that this is the path that we are going down. But in trying to prepare for some of those possible questions that we might receive, could be around how do we get the resources for design and planning? Because right now we've already identified that really is a significant gap, especially for, and I think that's why we oftentimes don't see a lot of those smaller communities or some of the tribal governments coming to some of these programs, because it's difficult for them to even get past that hurdle of, literally putting an idea down on a map, because they maybe don't even have a GIS resource to develop a map to display this is the project area. I'm also thinking of, there's a couple projects that we've been well aware of for quite a few years, and they've never really just come to fruition for various reasons. But there's one that I can think of right off the Crow Reservation that is really close to Chief Plenty-Coup State Park. But what they really probably need is potentially 250 to 400,000 for a shared use path along an MDT right of way. And so I think as we think about this targeted outreach, just being really well prepared with all of the different resources that could be available for the various project types that they might need. And oftentimes it really is a shared use path or a separated path that is off a highway to get especially children or families to and from point A to point B. It's not necessarily always that backcountry recreational trail. And so in thinking about some of those barriers, it's the design and planning. And so just being prepared to what are the design and planning resources that are available? Is it through commerce? Is it through another grant source? RTP again is an awesome opportunity because at least it can be used for the match. So then you can at least overcome the match hurdle. The working capital. So just being really thoughtful about various ways that they could actually have a fiscal sponsor. I can't recall the exact name off the top of my head, but years ago, there was a fiscal sponsor across the entire High Line area. And I want to say it was like the Rocky Mountain Economic Development Council or something like, it wasn't Economic Development Council, but something like that, where they were essentially a fiscal sponsor for a wide variety of applicants. And they would help them put the grant together. They would help them produce a map. They would help them have the working capital and seek the reimbursement. So that's another opportunity that, maybe we could engage with a partner like that. And then I also think another barrier could be the $70,000 ceiling in trail stewardship. RTP is a little bit better. We have $100K, but again, this goes back to, is this, are some of the needs more a transportation alternatives type grant through MDT versus more the traditional recreational trail type project? And so just, I have a feeling, especially in some of those Eastern Montana communities, getting from point A to point B through a separated or shared use path, oftentimes is the really high need. Brenda, correct me if I'm wrong, you live there, or Julie. But that's again, anywhere from, it could be almost $1 million project, easy. And so I think maybe working with Shelby to have some transportation alternatives program details as a part of this targeted outreach, these brochures, whatever we're all putting together. I assume David Holeen with MDT would have all those resources available as well. So just, so that way the tribal governments, all these contacts, whoever they are, have all the information for a wide variety of programs and eligibility, and it might help actually move those projects forward.
There's I don't know if Federal Highways still does this, but they had a spreadsheet on their website that had all the different federal grant opportunities for trail funding. And then, it was just really nice because it just summarized like the trail, the funding name, what it funded, how much it gave out, those kinds of things. It was just a bit visually, you could kind of sort through it really quickly. And I think I agree with Beth. I think it's easy to overwhelm people. So that's why the targeted outreach is going to be particularly helpful, is you can direct people towards, well, what you're envisioning is a multi-million-dollar project. You need to break it down into bite-sized pieces. This is where you can start with that. These are probably the most appropriate. This is the contact person to reach out to get that started. And I think that will be super helpful. There are a lot of resources out there, but like, I know in my little community of Highwood where I grew up, they were very overwhelmed when they started that process, getting the bridge.
Yeah.
And, and now they're well on their way. Once they get one success, then it's like, then they get it, figure it out.
I got a question. This is Christy. Forgive me if I'm being a little redundant, because I'm wondering if this funding will ever be able to just pay for plans only. Because I think that plays into what we're talking about right now is sometimes if it can be just the engineering of a project, that's the first in this series of pieces that we're trying to help communities with. And sometimes just the engineering is so daunting that it doesn't even get off the ground.
So I think that's a question for understanding what Senate bill, meaning that kind of goes in the intent of the bill and what it actually funds. And I mean, right, you would have to
Yeah,
the whole
Yeah,
thing.
it's going back to the legislature. And tweak it.
Yeah, allow that.
and from what I understand, in my limited time, and Beth and Hook could speak more to this, was that part of the intent of Senate Bill 24 was to fund on the ground, boots on the ground projects, specifically small community projects. Those are kind of the two phrases that I've heard. Because Christy, I was curious too about what about strategic planning and what about design? And I think that's going to be, we've identified it as a big gap and a big barrier.
Yeah.
But I don't know if trail stewardship I don't know if trail stewardship's the answer, but I think we need to start figuring out what is the answer, because it is a big gap.
Here's a thought, we're all in the room and we know so much about all the, we have great ideas and I love where you're going with the outreach and really creating a toolbox for folks. But I think that maybe we're jumping into assuming we know what the issues are, which I think we're probably close. But have we thought about maybe doing some sort of survey, reaching out to these all the communities? I mean, through the county commissioners, through their, all sorts of different channels, through their chambers and their economic development, and really ask them specifically, is this something, A, do you even know about it? B, if you know about it, and does your community, are you interested in it? And, and the yes, no's, yes, we're interested in it. What prohibits you from stepping into this process? Do you even have a plan? Is really trying to drill down into why are we not seeing more applicants? Because they're great programs. What are the obstacles? I think you're on track with a lot of them, but that sort of information would give us something really concrete to work with. And you can do it really quickly. And I think, and especially, I don't know what sort of responses you'll get from tribal, but I know that there's some work happening in the Glendive area with, in conjunction with Main Street Montana program. And they have gotten, they put it out on a Monday morning, and by Tuesday noon, they had 250, 300 replies, which was their goal for the whole duration. So there are communities that are wanting to be heard in different ways. So I really think that would be helpful.
I hear, and so part of this outreach, one is to just kind of hand over the information about the program, but two, what I intend to do is start the conversation just by saying, when it comes to outdoor recreation, what do you need? And so starting with a needs assessment, which can then really play into exactly what you're saying, Brenda, is then it can also be tied regionally. And we're saying, wow, we're seeing some common needs within Region 7. Great, now we can start designing and allocating resources to those needs, because they're different and they're unique and they're place-based, but there's a shared pattern here. And then they're significantly different than the needs that are being reported in the Flathead.
Honestly, I could even see having, at some roundtables or meetings, and I've seen this in some tours and things, and it's kind of it's an interactive. You put the question up there and everybody takes their phone and answers it right away.
All
And
everywhere.
it would, you're working at that point with live data, and really speaking to the people in the room. That's the thought.
You got.
Oh,
Yeah, sorry, I actually raised my hand this time. I'm trying to learn manners. I was looking at the statute again in this discussion around whether trail design and planning is included, and I think it's covered, and legal's on board with me under subsection 2A that says you're eligible to receive grant funds for new trail and shared use path construction. I think that clearly is inclusive of the design and planning for that. So I don't think we're out on that.
Nice.
So then I'm just looking at one of the, on page 5, we have the first project eligibility is new trail and shared use path construction. And so is part of that we could add to that language to say new trail and shared use path construction and design?
Design and construction.
Design and construction. New trail and shared path.
If it's just the design and not the construction, I guess I would wonder if it could be and or construction. Because does,
I can easily see you having a multi-year project where it takes you a year to design it.
yes. So at least you design it and then you've got the plan and then you start, and then you know how much it's going to cost. And then you start making plans to build it. I truly, and I like Brenda's idea about a survey, because I think that you would find that that is the issue, one of the issues why we're having a lower amount of applications, because people just can't do both.
I was also thinking that some of this needs assessment and surveying could be part of the straight trails plan process, because you're going to be going out and doing all sorts of assessment during that process. And you're just one person trying to do, manage grants. So do what you can do, but I think falling back on, there will be a more robust process coming up in the next couple of years that will really generate a lot of feedback loops for FWP. Process.
And ideally, part of this outreach too is to say, great, we'll be back again and we'll be talking more about the score, and we'll be talking more about state trails plan, and we'll be wanting your feedback, because this is going to be a bottom-up process, and it's gonna come from what communities are asking for, and then the strategic plan is going to be based around what needs are being reported. So one thought on design is, based on the information we have from years of RTP data and 2 years of TSP, is that we can, I think, really easily, it'll take a little time, but we have the resources to come up with the technical assistance training or sheet or brochure that says, here's project cost estimates. So it kind of helps people, like, here's a shared use path. If you want to turn a gravel path into a paved path that's a mile long, here's roughly what it will cost. Here's some trail sign. And so it can help people kind of get, it will help build realistic expectations right from the start, especially for folks who are taking on a new project.
Oh, that's great, Tom.
And the second thought is looking at the Trails Coalition, who is kind of eager to pivot and create a new in talking with the Trails Coalition. I think really that this whole idea about what funding exists for trails, whether it's with Department of Transportation, Commerce, FWP, or whether it's federal, it seems like the resources that they have, and everybody already, it's part of that coalition, knows what resources are out there. And so allowing their new webpage to roll out and to also provide trail funding opportunities that go beyond just the state, and that talk about, flathead electric, just these things that folks don't understand, or not that they don't understand, that they don't know what's aware of. Yeah. And so building that awareness seems like the Trails Coalition could come up with some sort of funding matrix that says, if you're looking for these projects to happen, here are potential sources. And really building that complement between the Trails Coalition and the Trails community who's looking for funding and trying to build out beyond just RTP and TSP, because there's millions and millions of dollars out there over the course of 5 years that really needs to be unearthed.
Yeah, it'd be great to see that on the the Trails Coalition website. I mean, right now there isn't a lot on there. So, and then also don't forget Bike Walk Montana
Yep.
as another source that either could, from their website, could link to the Trails Coalition website, but also they can help Liaison and spread the word about these projects or these grant funds, availability to their community and constituents.
Yeah, because we're all connected to the internet most of the day. Now we gotta connect each other on the internet in meaningful ways, rather than just trivial, ridiculous.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, we gotta connect to the Trails Network so that everybody connects. Okay, well then, that's kind of this breakdown. Now I think we can move really into these fine details about the changes to the application. Which also really goes into this outreach, because we're trying to make the process a little easier, and we're trying to make the new application foster project management plans, essentially. And that's kind of the approach that we want to take, is that the application is approachable, intuitive, and even if the project wasn't awarded, there's still something the productive that came out of it. So looking at this old to new, it's just kind of to follow along, and then the new application draft is on page 12 of the stack packet, which we will start going line by line. But I really just wanted to kind of just lay out what it was and then what it is now. And really the flow is to just first make sure that eligibility is clearly understood. I think there's been some confusion over the past 2 cycles of what projects are eligible, and also then what are my guidelines, what documents are really necessary. And so that first step of the eligibility and guideline review will say, here's what projects are eligible, make sure that you fall into the scope. And number 2, here are the necessary agreements, or the necessary documents, such as land use agreements, such as environmental assessments. And also, and that's where we can also say letters of support, will accept them. And this is this is where you want to include them, but really to make sure that no one's taking the time to complete an entire application and then leaving out that one land use agreement that to them might have been a 5-year agreement that just started 2 years ago, and that it's still live for them, but to make sure that they understand exactly what needs to be included before they even start filling things in. And then learning more about the organization, learning about their grant history. And since RTP has a risk assessment component, TSP doesn't, this grant history kind of fills in that risk assessment to say they have been awarded, they did submit all reports on time, they did stay within project costs, there wasn't any correspondence issues, this organization has been awarded and they've come through. And then really looking at the project and really focusing on what's the project, what's the reported benefits, and how are you going to put this in on the ground. And then looking at the final section, recreation, community, and connectivity, is what are the beyond just the project scope, the fine details of boots on the ground and steps and tasks required. What are the bigger benefits from this project that will impact the recreational community from here into the future, the community in which it's located or it's proximate to, and then generally how does it align with these larger trail principles of connectivity, resource degradation mitigation, and then long-term maintenance. What is your long-term maintenance goal? We really just want to know. You don't have to give us, the 20-year plan and vision of this maintenance goal, but we want to know that you're thinking about it, because that's a big thing that's going to keep access to these trails open, is making sure organizations are thinking in the long term as well. So any questions just about those changes before we dive into the scoring criteria itself and then compare application to scoring?
I'm reading through the connectivity piece and comparing the RTP to the TSP plan. And So RTP, and I know we talked about this, Stephanie, yesterday, a little bit, saying we could change the way RTP does this, because presently RTP is still two separate sections.
Yeah,
Between
and
connectivity,
we can combine them. There's really no rhyme or reason why I separated them. It's just.
it was, that's the way it was, I get it,
Yeah.
yeah, and so I'm still just, I guess I'm concerned on the motorized community for the 7 grants that come through, because I work so closely with them, is that I'm still concerned that the scoring leaves them wanting, for the correct push lift within that scoring methodology. So there's, within the TSP one, there's basically point C, describe the ongoing maintenance necessary. There's not a lot here, linkages of trails. When you got a trail that just goes to the backcountry and back out, it's like, okay, there's no linkage. It's just, unless you count linking backcountry. Yeah.
But it may link to other trails in the backcountry.
It may, but in most cases they don't, not in the winter. Winter trails, generally.
Be out that.
Yeah, because usually most of these trails run right up to
Right.
Wilderness. Got to stop. It's a hard, cold stop. I mean, there's a sign there saying you cross this line, you will have a lovely visit from the feds.
You'll have
Yeah,
you'll have
and
a fine.
yeah, you'll have a big fine. And so there's ways that it's just the winter trails are just loops at
A little
best.
bit of a unique situation.
They are very unique. And the reason I'm bringing this up is that in the past, the scoring, when we score them all and you stack rank them, they're all sitting at the very bottom. And that's why they were being, just hammered by the methodology. And it's just simply, there was nothing in the scoring methodology to push them, into a fair level ground.
So, but one of our goals is to, we haven't really talked about it, but, that summer winter access trail could that be a component of the scoring mechanism, is allowing, because we think about trails and hiking and biking in summer months, or at least the winter laden months. So there might be a way we could add points to winter access applications.
Yeah, I think
It's the way to counter
approaching
that.
seasonal, like looking at applications and seeing what the seasonality of this project can be part of a review.
So yesterday at the end of the meeting, I wanted to take it offline with Stephanie, but I will bring it up about the discussion I had. And I said, I've asked to take a look at the past grants that scored low and rescore them with the new methodology and see where they fell. Because it's like, until we have a little bit more hard data like that, it's just, this is just, a little too touchy-feely. And I really would like to know what this new methodology does on those few grants. And to say, where do they fall? Where are they coming in at, to rescore them under that new rubric, to say, let's see where they come out at. Did we give them the appropriate scoring mechanism to, get where we would like to see these grants sit? And I think that's a fair ask to, say, let's take a real grant that's already gone through the process and rescore it. You've got a methodology. There's no reason we can't rescore them. There's just a few of them. And I'm not asking for all of them. I'm just.
And this is RTP specific?
It's RTP, but it's also TSP, because there are some grooming grants coming through TSP now.
Could you? I think they've all been awarded for. the sake of
They were
TSP.
awarded, right.
He's just asking for that kind of historical perspective to see if this would put them even lower.
Yeah, I want to see where.
I'm just saying that there's a way that we can, I get your point, but I also feel like connectivity, mitigation, and maintenance is too critical for all the other kinds of trails out that we're trying to fund. It's
It
an
is.
important component.
It's very important, but the interesting piece here is that these programs have become, and because of what I talked about yesterday, where the existing programs for snowmobile were poorly written in the legislature, so the money's very sliced off. I mean, like OHV is like a total of a couple $100,000 in their
Right. No,
entire
I
grant.
get
you know,
it.
so
I get all that perspective. And I'm saying, let's find a solution. So moving forward, so that they don't score low, you know, and they can get the needed benefit that they provide, they get the funding, but also not lose that important component for
And-
other applications.
And this really gets into, I think, the crux of yesterday. Beth described, you know, there's kind of 4, maybe 5 core types of grants. Okay, there's construction, acquisition, education, grooming. Those are the, you know, and maintenance probably, you know, or something like that. And then, but, you know, under construction falls all kinds of different things, but each one of those cores, almost, in my opinion, should have its own scoring mechanism. Because you're literally comparing apples to oranges here. I mean, it's like the construction of a new hiking trail in, you know, the Gallatin or something is just so different from the grooming of a winter trail, whether it be cross-country ski or it's just 2 different things. I mean, you know, they talking about connectivity in the grooming world is kind of like, what's the point? And whereas, you know, talking about the connectivity of a trail that is linking, you know, city center to the bedroom
Safer.
community is huge.
Right.
I mean, they're just apples and oranges. So this is where I was thinking yesterday, you know, it's like we had these swim lanes and we had specific scoring algorithms for these core types. I think it just makes way more sense.
That's an
It
interesting.
also makes a lot more work as
It's,
well.
I would not, and, you know, and I will also say, I also want to just make this point before it gets too late in the process. I totally understand your point about wanting to fund it 100%, because to have to go back and readjust their budget and their narrative is hard. But in the 4 years that I've been here, I have seen grant after grant after grant come through with inflated numbers that we basically said, and I was called the latrine Nazi in the first 2 years. And it's like a latrine did not cost $56,000 4 years ago. It cost $14,000. Okay, so we took that grant and said, you don't get 56 grand for a latrine, you get 14. And we funded them at 70% because that was the right number to fund at.
But they still have to, I mean, if their project has inflated numbers, they still have to back their project up with actual receipts of costs.
That's
So-
fine, but I can tell you what, I can get a receipt. You know, and when we know the cost of asphalt and we know the cost of latrines, we should not be awarding an inflated number, period. I am not going to stand here as a public citizen on this committee and allow this money to be wasted. This money can be used elsewhere correctly. So, and I feel really strongly about that.
I think one way to get a little bit better feeling of whether or not potential awardees are interested in being awarded partially versus not at all is ask that in the survey.
Would you accept?
Yeah.
We do,
Well,
we do.
No, we do it there, but I mean, really, again, digging down a little bit more. You know, in this world, you may not, and I think in the application, it's just kind of, you're in a different mindset. You're
Well,
completing the
the
application.
application
When you're in a
is-
survey, you feel like you're being heard, and I think you're gonna be a little bit more, not that they're dishonest, but they're in the mindset of, they want to hear from me. And I think that that would be an important question. Does this prohibit you from applying, and or, you know, are you an all or nothing, or will partial, not will you accept it, because it's yes, but does that make or break, you know?
But there's been many grants that come through that say, is it all or nothing? And they say yes, because they're buying a bridge. You know, it's like, it is what it is. You know, they've got the estimates from and it's like, it's totally backed up with the right paperwork, and I have no problem giving that person 100% funding, you know, and pushing them up the list. That's totally cool. You know, but when we know what this stuff costs, and they just haven't taken the time to really go out and get a couple estimates from a couple different manufacturers, because there are multiple manufacturers. It's like, come on, you know, and that's where this organization needs to be the oversight to say, you know, it's like all of these projects, as Kent and I were talking about, almost all of them are scalable. So, you know, if we can fund more at 75%, I get it, it's work, but it is worth the effort to get more groups on the ground working with usable funds. I think.
So I'm just gonna try, or Kent, do you want to go?
But the only thing I was gonna go back to this issue of Mark with the scoring, and Tom, I hear you. I think having individual rubrics would be tough, and then be tough to measure. But maybe what you could have, and I was just trying to think of this, you know, when you start talking about 7A, the connectivity, maybe you have a couple, they can like more difficult for you guys, but maybe a couple of sub questions, 7A1, 7A2, and you say, or it connects up. And I wouldn't want to go 1 through 5, but maybe a 4 and a 2, but it connects up so much acreage. Because the trail system, we do talk about snow trails. You have a trail and then it accesses a certain amount of ground that is open. And there's actually acreage for there. And so you could say this area opens up greater than, I'm just gonna throw a number, 10,000 acres or less than 10,000 acres. And so you could just have a real easy, just something that would not penalize the winter trails, because they're so much different than the territory. But maybe just a subcategory. And so you kind of either or, either you're going to use the connectivity, because I think it is important, we should keep that in, but allows a different kind of numerical rating maybe for the winter, and just say, this is, we're gonna use this for summer trails, just an idea, but that would be an acreage, and you could put miles of trail in there if you really want to get a number of boom trail. Anyway, just a sub way to
Yeah, that's a
capture
great
both. So,
idea.
Yeah.
I'm thinking like a flow chart, with snow.
Yeah, and then you write, and then you still have a rubric, and you can still rank them, but you're kind of, it's apples and oranges, but at least you're not
Not
just
using
saying
the appropriate question to
for
score it.
for the trail
Under
to
that
rubric. Yeah, hey, just like that.
Yeah, and as I look at the actual verbiage under the connectivity, and I'm looking at page 7, number 6. And how we've tried to always think about the score around connectivity is not necessarily in just connecting point A to point B as a linkage. And I think this definition really speaks to it, that if you have access to this particular trail, then potentially this access point provides a connection to the trail user to other trail systems, potentially other trails in the area, or the natural or scenic corridors. So it might, I've always really advocated for more water trails across the state. And so as I think about some of our river trails that, talk about the Smith as a natural or scenic corridor, or sluice boxes has a linear trail and sluice boxes that connects the trail user to a natural or scenic corridor. So it's not necessarily connecting the sluice box 8-mile trail to anything else, but it is providing this recreational, natural experience to the trail user, or to cultural resources,
Right.
which it says that too.
Yeah.
And I think this is where, again, we could really work with some various applicants to tie into what are the cultural resources in the area? Are there pictographs? Are there, whatever there might be? Or parks, as I think about the Flathead Groom Trail System, it connects to, it essentially connects to Glacier National Park or the backside of Big Mountain Ski Resort area. So it doesn't necessarily always have to be a connecting trail to trail. We've always tried to see this as a much larger connectivity.
And I
So if
will,
that helps at all, but I still
So
think
that-
that you've solved the maintenance and sustainability.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Blending those does allow for the grooming applicants to score much better.
right,
And we are gonna get to the nitty gritty of the trail stewardship program after the break, but I want to direct our attention back to the scoring criteria, because I do think it addresses a lot of what you're saying, Mark. And if we just want to, because connectivity has been the word of the morning, if we just jump to the bottom, this is the shorthand version of the scoring criteria. On page 14 is the long version of, and this is the only thing that potential applicants will see. They're not going to see the rubric. If they do the research, it's now become public record and they can find it, which will be to their advantage. But what they will see is the connectivity is not a standalone issue anymore. And so if the project doesn't improve the public's connection to existing trails and or recreational resources in the area, it is their responsibility to then say, okay, how does this project serve to reduce negative impacts to the environment? And how do you present the ongoing maintenance needs of the project? So they realize we're weak in the connectivity project just based on the project type itself. How can we strengthen our argument to say we're mitigating negative impacts to the environment by keeping people on a trail corridor? And how are we also going to say, not only do we deserve this funding because we want to brush out this trail or we want to add to this trail, but we're also saying we have a long vision here, and we're gonna be able to either come back and get funding from you, or we're gonna seek alternative funding sources in 5 years. And so no longer is connectivity a standalone because no, it's not a wholesale thing. It doesn't apply equally to all projects. It's a good phrase, and it's something that trail community values is connectivity. But it's not a standalone thing. Mitigation is also part. So if it's not connecting, how is it maintaining and how is it reducing impacts?
so the one other piece, so I know that Michelle McNamee did a study, but it hasn't been released, at least to us, over the scoring algorithm and why some of these grants were scoring low. So I know in offhand comments, connectivity was mentioned, and that's why I'm focusing on it. Okay, there may be other factors. I just don't, but I haven't read the thesis, so I don't know what.
Yeah, well, so I think another theme that's coming up right now in this discussion is we want to make sure we're making good investments. And personally, I don't think connectivity, mitigation, and maintenance are the end all be all factors of good investments. No, the project plan and project implementation are the big things.
Yeah.
Does this applicant know what they're talking about, and have they proven to us that they're going to be able to implement this realistically with not only their project and budget narrative, but do they have the resources? Have they researched this? And when they line out what these general tasks are on a project that will take 2 years, does this make sense? Is this project well researched? Then what are the auxiliary benefits as it relates to recreation in the area, communities in the area, and then these larger like virtues of trail work and trail networks, which is connectivity, mitigation, and maintenance.
Yep.
And I think as we after the break, as we dive into the application and what it is, and the scoring rubric, I think that's when we can start deciding, do we weight heavily on project plan and project implementation? Do we give them two times the scoring points on that? And then keep recreational benefit, community development, and connectivity, mitigation, and maintenance at just one time, just a 5-point scale. And then project implementation is actually rated on a 5-point scale, but it's doubled based on the scoring rubric. Because really, if we're trying to invest $3 million a year into trail projects, we want them to we want them to benefit the recreational community, we want them to benefit local communities, and we want them to hit these connectivities. But we really just want to make sure the plan sounds right, it's realistic, and they're presenting an argument that says they can implement it and they can do this. And then we know we're investing our money into projects that are going to start and finish on time and accordingly. And then they're also ideally aligning with these other larger social benefits.
I think we've also had to deal with in the past, sort of project fatigue. Grooming and trail maintenance, from like the Forest Service that comes every year, it's almost part of their budget now just to file for grants. And, it's every year. Custer Gallatin blows money out of the system for trail maintenance. And every year, the Flathead, the Little Belts, and all of these different groups, the Bitterroot, everybody, it's an annual budget item to apply for a grant in order to do grooming. I mean, these groups have $500,000 machines that groom trails, and they cost, the diesel is at $5 a gallon and they burn 9 gallons an hour. And this fatigue of they're in here every single year asking for money seems to be dragging their scores down. And we don't have an alternative plan for funding this right now. It's like short of having a new legislative session that rewrote, how we're going to deal with, maintenance of trails, which
You just need Bob Walker to work with Terry Gauthier to get another.
I know. Yeah.
I mean, there's all that marijuana money, maybe there's a possibility
So
of
in-
a new
But
legislation.
that's not the case right now. So,
No,
so
it's
anyway,
not.
we have to deal with it. So I'm bringing that up, to say, it's like, we have to deal with that because I think that fatigue has drawn the scores down. Even the very first thing is, have you applied before? You get more points if you haven't. And you get less.
We wanna.
I get that,
Representative.
but
There's
that-
grants and then there's subsidies. And so understanding how we want to maybe realign money that has been traditionally functioning as a grant, but really has been a subsidy, is going to require a lot of conversation and alternative funding sources as well. But grants, we want to encourage new applications. We want new projects.
I'm totally cool.
And we
with
don't
it.
want to penalize someone for being funded for 5 years in a row. But the question is, what is that in the grand vision of the grant program? And how can we not close the door on those folks, but how can we also figure out new ways to fund this reoccurring cost? Because at a certain point, it's a reoccurring cost rather than a new project.
So
Exactly.
this, and maybe I'm too new to this, and this is too simple of an idea. But that grants are broken into kind of similar to what you were saying, the yes, no, and that flow chart, 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. So if we have $1 million, 333,000 goes to those that are connectivity. Another third goes to mitigation, another third goes to maintenance. I don't know. I mean, is that kind of what you're asking for?
I'm asking for, a closer look at the scoring algorithm so that we aren't penalizing these
Yeah.
groups that are having to come back year on year.
Yeah, because it's an ongoing thing. I mean,
It's the only source of funding right
They're dependent on these grant programs to really maintain the system.
and before I came into this group, I would have thought that something like that should be funded elsewhere, but not knowing
now.
the system. And I think that's really what you're saying, but
And-
that's not the reality of it.
And
So how do we
yeah,
manage these funds that we have?
and the state tried, they created the snowmobile fund and, it's like, it was a great idea. It's just really written to not grow with the.
Yeah, so that's where it came to the hard dollar versus the percentage.
So we are going to address a lot of these. We're getting ahead of ourselves, and really just before we go on break, because after we come back from break, we're going to look at the application and do a deep dive into the scoring rubric. and be able to have these conversations with the rubric in front of us. And then the final thing we're gonna do today is talk about what are the funding goals of the project? What do we want to be investing in? Do we want to be allocating a certain percentage of each year's money to reoccurring costs, to subsidizing very necessary projects, but they're not new, or and so we will get into that. But really, before we go on break here, I just want to walk through, this is a shorthand version of what applicants will see. It follows the application, and it also allows them to understand exactly what's being asked of them within the application. And so in looking at this, for folks online and in the room, are there any questions, concerns, confusions about kind of what we're asking? Putting yourself in an applicant's shoes to say, okay, here's the criteria for each section. How does this look? And if you can recall, and I don't have a copy of it, the last year's scoring criteria, how do you feel as though it compares to that? Because this is going to be the public facing criteria that's the first thing that applicants see before they even start answering.
This is minor in its syntax, but I think it will help is put an and or between mitigation and maintenance.
Okay.
Or would that be an incorrect way to present this? Because you're saying the proposed project either one, improves the public's connection to existing trails and or resources. Two, serves, and even put in bullets or numbers, serves to reduce and or presents the ongoing maintenance needs of the project. Because the way I would look at that, if I were filling out that grant application, is that it needs to be all three, as
When you
opposed
say
to an
and,
either or.
And so, and I,
Or
we'll
am I
address,
reading that correctly?
when we walk through the application, I think
Okay.
we'll address exactly that, because it says, you know, they're gonna realize, oh, connectivity is not a part of this, but then the next question in the same section is, okay, here is how we.
But literally,
But right
this is what
here,
they're seeing.
on
This
the
is what
very
they're seeing.
last,
No, they're seeing page 7, they're seeing page 7,
Oh,
which is further described, and it's, this is shorthand. And so there's 3 full sentences that say,
Is it
proposed.
page 7 or is it page?
oh, sorry,
14?
page 14.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because
it's
I
still,
was gonna ask, why is that different than that?
yeah,
Shorthand.
But it's just-
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So everybody look at page 14.
Page 14.
but it's still an and or in there, I think is
Like the-
Yeah, the.
changes.
Yeah, sorry, I gotta scoot to a 10 o'clock across the street, but so I probably won't be back, so. Thank
See you, Beth.
you.
Yeah.
Appreciate
Have a
it. Good to see
fantastic-
you. And good
And-
luck.
I'm going to be jumping into the same meeting as Beth, so we should be done by 11, but I'll be out between 10 and 11 as well. Sorry about that.
See ya. Hope.
And just really quick, I'll just say one thing, that probably the most unique project application, you might have to try to actually vet through this scoring criteria and the rubric is a signage project.
Mm.
They're so unique
Mhm.
and oftentimes have difficulty in trying to really answer some of these. So
Good point.
anyway, just
Thank you. And
in
yet
talking about all of the various types of projects. There's one to throw at you at the end.
Actually, I think that sign project would serve to reduce negative impacts on the environment. Keeping people, you know,
on the
directing,
trail.
directing the user where they should be as opposed to where they shouldn't be. I mean, that's very clear to me.
But it's all the rubric, she's saying, put it with the sign project.
Oh, I see, yeah.
And I think, well, that's insight there is something that will be helpful to keep in the back of our head as we come back from break and start looking at the application. And then, but if we could save a lot of those and go till the final slide where we do break down project location, project type, and project implementation, and we say, are there certain based on looking at the application in the rubric, are there certain projects that or certain location types or certain applicant entities that are disadvantaged based on the way we're looking at this? How can we consider that, and how can we also take that into account when we, you know, prioritize projects? We want trail signage projects, and we want trail signage projects to apply. We don't want them to feel as though they're behind the 8 ball when they start because the scoring criteria and the application doesn't allow them to compete with others. And I think that's kind of the theme and that we're going to directly address after the break. But if it works for everybody, I think it's time for a break. 10 minutes. All right. Folks on Zoom, we'll be back in 10 minutes at 10:05. All right, folks online, we're gonna get back to here.
The public. And,
Sorry. No worries, thank you.
the 99,000 square feet of that existing building. Which is building.
All right. So we went over the criteria and now I think we're getting into the finer details, which is a topic of interest.
Middle of it.
Sure. So if everyone wants to just go to page 12 of their stack packet. Oh, this is the wrong slide.
Oh, where are you?
Okay, we'll just stay on this slide. This, we'll address the rubric on page 16 in a second. But first, before we compare these questions to the scoring rubric, I think it's just important for all of us to walk through page 12 and 13 and read through the actual questions that potential grantees will be looking at. And making sure, really this for us right now is a way to go through the language of the application and make sure we think the language is appropriate and make sure nothing's being left out or making sure everything's clear. So just starting from the top here, applicant information, very straightforward. Oh, and by the way, they've already gone through a checklist for eligibility and for necessary documents at this point. So they're through the first step and now they're actually building and filling out the application. So we're just getting a feel for the applicant themselves and then the organization they're a part of. And getting that organizational type, that should just say organizational. Getting a feel for their website is to have it on the application is a way for us to just checks and balances, go in there and look at it because really part of what we've tried to eliminate with this application is having mission statements being copied into applications. We don't, that's not really what we're looking for when we're evaluating the project. We're evaluating, is the plan correct? Is their implementation realistic? And how does it fit with these larger things? The mission of such and such foundation is something that we can do our due diligence and research on our own. We don't need that being peppered in and copied and pasted just for a formality.
Not every organization that applies those can have a website.
And that's fine, yeah. So then moving to grant history, let's just look at section 1 here. Section A, has the applicant organization received either TSP within the past 5 years? Does the applicant currently have a grant going? Is the proposed project being used as a match for any other outdoor recreation program at FWP? And that's just a way to understand, one, if they have had an application in the past 5 years, let's go look at their status reports. We can go back and look at their final product and we can look at the correspondence, like was the correspondence smooth? Were we constantly waiting? Were there reports submitted late? What's their history as an applicant? And then also currently, are they receiving funding? Is it for this project? How's that project going? Eventually we'll see, does this project align with that project? Is it separate? If it is separate, are they doing a good enough job on the current project to warrant funding to handle too? Do we think they have the
It's like
capacity?
your risk assessment, these two questions. So grant history, I'll set on that. Any thoughts, comments, suggestions, changes to the language?
We just want to go through the list first before we start talking about this.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So we'll use this to get familiar with the questions. And then the next slide, we'll walk through, okay, here's the question. And then as the stack has a scoring authority, let's make sure the rubric makes sense and it aligns with the question. So we all feel comfortable. So that next spring, when this is in front of us, we're all familiar and in agreement. So I think grant history, section 1 is, I think we're in good shape. Section 2, title and overview. And really this is essentially to put into the contract. That project title will go directly into the contract, and that 2-sentence project overview will be the summary project narrative. That's the first page of the award contract. And it also just allows us to, before diving into the application as reviewers, to get a pretty clear idea of what we're doing. Section 3 project plan. This is when we really start seeing this is the real quality control measure of what's going on. So describing the location and physical traits. This is one way to, on the back end, to start categorizing project types.
Yeah.
For our own internal assessment. But it's also a really clear indication that, all right, they know the location and the project traits are pretty well drawn out. And if they're not drawn out, it's, we can, that'll be evaluated and taken into consideration. Section 3 project plan, subsection B, looking for who the workforce is and their qualifications. And this is all part of, is the project well thought out? Is it designed, and are the appropriate entities doing the work? And it really, this also kind of goes back to that design and planning component. But it's just, we want to invest in the right projects, and we want to make sure the right projects or the right people are doing the work on particular projects. And this is really a way to make sure that folks are qualified. And then getting to the letter of commitment and support. If it is a trail foundation heading the project, but they're going to help, and they're going to get MCC in there. Is MCC on board? Is it clear that MCC is aware of this project? Have they voiced support for this particular application? And then right away we go into how does this, please describe how this project improve public access to the outdoors. One component of the application is we are going to have word limits. And so as opposed to letting someone just wax poetic for 700 words, we really just want the clear, and I think, part of the technical assistance training that'll happen this fall is bullet notes are acceptable. Just if you want to just start listing out how this improves access, we don't need a full paragraph, we don't even need full sentences. Just kind of start listing out how does this improve access to the outdoors on the offset.
Is that like a 500 word limit?
Yeah, I think we'll be able to look at past applications and then see kind of what's a range of how much, because 500 words I think is that's a page. Yeah, so it might even be a half page.
Is that, I'm again,
Probably a lot.
I don't want to, I'm not making this, is this duplicative of like section 7 connectivity, how it improves access? Is that connectivity, or is that just, or we just, I think in this section, it makes perfect sense to have this question up here. It just feels kind of duplicative.
Well, I think it's the general, and I think once we get to section 7, we can circle back to see.
Yeah.
But I think this is just access in general.
Okay.
Not talking about connectivity, just general. How does the public benefit from this project when it comes to access to the outdoors?
Okay.
And then, yes, Christy. You're muted, but I see your hands up. Still.
Oh, sorry, I'm on again. I have all these screens going and I couldn't get to my to the unmute. I thank you for taking my question, and I wish I could have suggested this a little bit earlier, but back in the project plan, question 3, I was just wondering if we could consider also in the scoring criteria, if we could consider if the project meets the aesthetic value, I guess, or the aesthetic plan of a community. So I want to just throw out there that maybe we're not trying to go with the low, you know, to make sure that everybody's spending the least amount necessarily on whatever, if it's a latrine or a trail sign, but does it enhance or does it match what the community has already implemented, or if the plan for the community? So let's say Kalispell, you know, wants to put in a latrine. Maybe they've got a plan that's got, you know, nice stone work and wood work and things like that on the latrine, and it's not just cement walls and your basic thing.
Oh, I see what she's saying.
Yeah, well, so when it does come to those aligning with existing strategies, the next question here at 3D, I think speaks to what you're asking. So 3D, describe how this project meets a goal and or aligns with an existing strategy of a local, regional, or federal land management initiative. And so this is an example. One, fish in a barrel, mention the school. Mention the state trails plan, and then it can go into a local plan that says, so for example, this past application, Lewistown was awarded a grant, and I was just writing a summary, and it said, we've awarded the town of Lewistown $75,000 to finish their trail plan, which aligns with the city of Lewistown's 2020 trail plan. And so I think this, Christy, is the question 3D for folks to say, not only does this project improve public access to the outdoors, it also aligns with an existing vision of maybe our organization or the larger organization with FWP, with the Forest Service, and things like that.
Okay, so while so aesthetics, like the look of something, would also be that's included in that plan. I mean, I guess I'm just wondering if we don't always talk about the aesthetic value, but I think that making sure that we're not just doing the least expensive, but maintaining our look as Montana and our pride as Montana. And I'm not sure that always shows up in existing trail plans.
True.
I think my one concern would be that there's probably a fair amount or many communities that don't have it at like specific aesthetic plans. I'm not.
Right.
So if we
There's
were
that
to,
backcountry stuff.
if we were to specifically line that out, that might be a disadvantage to a number of applicants. However, during the training, I think we can, meets an existing goal or aligns with an existing strategy. And so, for example, I think we could provide some line items that say a town's trail plan, a town's view shed plan, or something like that. But if I think potentially some applicants would be lost if they came across a question specifically asking about aesthetics.
No, I know. What I'm saying is, if we're scoring something and it comes in a little bit higher, maybe it's not inflated, maybe it's not, maybe a latrine is 75,000 and we know that it could be like 50,000, but they're adding rock and an exterior that will, dress it up. Will they be penalized for that? And that's where I'm trying to get to.
I think if they can tie that to a larger existing strategy of a local, regional, federal government, they would be penalized. But then I think if they can't, and they're spending an extra 20,000 on aesthetics, we have to ask ourselves, is that a good investment?
Mm-hmm.
But if they can tie it to something that says we're aligning with a larger vision, and this project plays into a strategy of Kalispell, for example, that would make sense. But if it's not tied to something, I think it would be they would and most likely should be penalized if it's not playing into something bigger.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
So one question though, you limit it to federal land management initiative, so maybe there's broader language or,
I think you're saying local, regional.
I get that, but it finishes it off with land management initiative, which is limiting. It's not like a brand tourism initiative. Right?
Okay,
Yeah, you see what I'm saying? She's saying, well, what if our brand strategy for Kalispell is that things are aesthetically, aligned with, they have a downtown plan.
Yeah.
And they want to build this outhouse, and in order for them to build it, it has to have this look, which adds another $20,000 to the price tag, but, right? So I don't know, it's just something to consider. I'm
Maybe
not saying
change the
that.
word
So
land
land-
management to planning.
that's restricted,
Yeah.
land
Or
management
just
initiative
drop
is restricted.
Just say,
Right.
drop land management.
Describe how this project meets a goal and or aligns with an existing strategy of local, region, or federal.
Initiatives.
Federal land initiative, I don't know, just,
Or is it planning initiatives or, maybe you can dig out federal.
well,
Well,
A lot of this stuff
then
ends
they
up
lose
going
the
on
opportunity to
federal
tie
land,
into.
Yeah, that's
Park
true.
Service,
The US Forest Service. I was, exactly.
I mean, I would, if I was a grant writer, I would read it broader than land management initiative, but some people are very,
Mhm.
technical in their reading of these things, so I trust you to figure it out.
Mhm.
We don't need to wordsmith it.
So we won't wordsmith it today, but I want to propose this question. If this is a land management agency, this is a land management grant program, if we remove that, are we creeping outside of our scope? And I would just love to hear people's thoughts on that.
I don't think we're creeping out of the scope. I think what we're trying to do is make sure that we're giving those folks the opportunity to show that they are aligning.
Yep.
Right? So that's the goal of that question, is to show that they're thinking in terms of, aligning with goals of their local or regional or state or federal something.
Yep.
So if the project is not, it doesn't escape the scope, but
So maybe we are gonna wordsmith. What if I said, describe how this project meets a goal and or aligns with an existing local, regional, or federal strategic plan?
yeah,
I think that's even a little strong. You can just say strategy. Because some of these, again, some of them, I mean, if you think of tribal tourism or tribal entities, they probably don't have a plan, an official strategic plan, but they may have strategies. They may have, initiatives and
Goals or
ideas and goals, but I think the word plan is almost restrictive, so I have to produce this plan. I mean, the state trails plan is 10 years old.
Yes, right.
Local,
But I
regional.
like where you're going with that, dropping that land management.
strategy or.
And I think, I agree with Ginny in that it's not, I think we need to leave it a little bit more broad.
Yep.
And we have other places where,
We
That
You
got
can
your
say
question-
strategy
your question
or
on that
initiative
fits.
or plan.
Yeah,
because we
Yeah.
want them to be looking at the whole, at the
Definitely.
bigger.
Yep.
We have other places where the land management is addressed.
Okay, so we will broaden the language on that.
that's
Nice.
Does that help, Christy? Oh, she's muted. We'll just.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for bringing that up and showing that, how that language could be kind of narrow and limited. Okay, so that's section 3, and then moving on to section 4 here, project implementation. Describe an estimated timeline of the proposed project.
Mhm.
I think that's just an opportunity for them to show how realistic their planning and expectations are. Because I think that's when the review panel says, it's gonna take 3 years to install like a latrine. How is that? We've had projects that are able to get that started and through in 6 months. Yeah.
Right, right.
So that's kind of a quality assurance, whether I'd like to see whether it's realistic.
Again, as a bulleted line item, a good idea there, do you think? Or-
So the next question, describe the general tasks that are required. And this is something that I implemented this year with new grantees. Because currently what we were tracking with grants was only spending. And that's not, that we're not tracking project progress, we're tracking budgetary is just tracking spending. We're not able to make sure that that spending was aligned with these tasks that are just the project arc. And so this is saying, please provide these general tasks. We've got to assess the trail. We've then got to contract out MCC. MCC does the work. We then go and walk the trail, and then we add the signage at the end. And so this line 4B is another piece that will just go directly into the contract.
I love that because a lot of these grants that we looked at last year had, like, that the real work was volunteer work, so they're not expending a bunch of money.
No.
But they're making progress. You just don't know about it because they aren't submitting receipts yet. So.
And the other feature that 4B provides is that it then aligns directly with their status and final reporting, because they just go task by task and says, yes, we trained volunteers, and then they can provide a description of that and provide some photos. And then they move, task 2 was get the volunteers on the trail. Volunteers got on the trail, they were combined 400 hours of volunteer time, and we cleared 14 miles of trail, pictures provided, and then they moved to this, that, and the other thing. And then it allows some uniformity with project reporting, but it also allows all grantees to tell their own story about it and provide as much detail and imagery as they want.
Yeah, that's great. And you could incorporate those into, success stories,
Yes.
project report, and that's really great.
And those final reports, and this will probably come up again, is those final reports, then I removed the template and says, no, just follow your general tasks. And if you are a nonprofit that has a decent budget and you want to make this a flashy report, by all means, go ahead and submit it to us and then share it with your stakeholders. And so it gives them an opportunity to not only fulfill the requirements, the reporting requirements of the grant, it then allows them to turn around and say, hey, this is what we did. This is what we continue to do. We did it with Fish, Wildlife, Parks money. And here's the larger benefits, and we get to tell your story.
Right.
And then it builds a project portfolio for us. So then we turn around and say, we really want to promote this project, and it's 90% complete. We just need to put a few FWP logos on it, and now we can share this information pretty easily. And it's a time saver. And then,
So Tom, can I just ask a question that's really specific, because you had asked Tammy for like a timeline back a couple months ago, I think.
yeah,
And she said, I helped her formulate a response, but we did have a task timeline. Was that adequate at that time for that?
in the old application.
Well, it was in regards to the current working grants that you were asking about, like where.
The 2022.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just, instead of going back into the applications and making up those tasks myself, I just allowed current grantees to confirm the budget, to make sure there weren't any changes that we had to change before the contract. And then for them to describe general tasks in their own words, so that I wasn't going to misinterpret what they, but from here on out, this section 4B gets cut and pasted into the draft contract sent to grantees so that they confirm, but it will eliminate that email that I sent to Tammy, because this specific question wasn't in the email.
Okay, fair enough. All right.
So it was a little more, there was one more step in the contract writing process this year.
My guess is in her response to, she may have been thinking you were RTP.
Okay.
So we'll clear that up.
Mhm. And then this is then 4C, provide the summary budget, which outlines the funding for the proposal, and that's just the table. that says material costs, labors, special contracts, indirect costs, and then that's just their way to give us the clear table. And then it provides the match as well. And that too then just gets cut and pasted into the end contract. And then from our assessment of it, we get to determine whether that's a realistic summary budget or not.
That, the budget is kind of that spreadsheet piece that's in there right now in web grants, right?
Yes.
Yeah, just making sure I'm tracking.
And so section 3 and 4 are really allowing the grantees to say, here's our plan and here's how we plan to implement it. And that's from that point on, we say, all right, this project, the timeline's realistic, the spending's realistic, they have proper workforce, and everything seems to be aligned. And then section 5, we move into kind of these bigger picture question of 5A, describe the intended recreational benefits to all identified users. So one, folks get to explain what these recreational benefits are. Some might be obvious, others might be, this might be a great opportunity for them to say, based on the location of this project, there are these recreational benefits that us as a review panel might not see on the surface. And then they also then get to start saying, well, it's a path specifically for snowmobile brushing in the winter, but in the summer, this is also used by OHVs and all sorts of other user groups. So then it's able to say seasonally, and specifically, this is a trail brushing project for snow trails in the winter, but there's also auxiliary benefits for recreationalists in the summer as well. And just to increase their case there. And 5B, describe the ways in which the project facilitates access and use of trails by persons with disability, older citizens, economic disadvantage, and other non-traditional populations or groups. So this recreational benefit really is based on improved access, not just in terms of opening locked up public lands, but improving access to recreationalists that might have disabilities or traditionally have disadvantages accessing or using certain trails or recreational features. So for example, this could go from a gravel path to a paved path, and folks could say this way, community members, senior citizens now, it's easier for them to travel. Folks in wheelchairs have greater access and can move more easily on the trail because we're improving its surface. And so it's really an opportunity for the applicant to start opening our eyes to what benefits the project proposed that are beyond just the broad scope. So moving on to community development, describe the ways, 6A, describe the ways in which the project creates new partnerships between trail users, private interests, public agencies within the project scope. So this is really, are you operating in a silo or are you including others? Are others aware? Does buy-in exist? Because there could be really great buy-in that we just didn't anticipate, and that should be allocated into the scoring because on the surface it looks like a very simple shared use path continuation, but this is the opportunity for the grantee to say it. Then it connects folks to the downtown corridor, and we've been in touch with the local bakery who wants this because now people can get to the final end of the trail and go to the bakery and enjoy it. And we've talked to them about it, and they want to promote the trail. And all of a sudden, there's just a lot more depth to the project than we might see just within the project scope.
Do you think that it's too restricted to say new partnerships? Would it make sense to add something like expanding existing? Because I'm thinking if you're, I don't know, you have an existing trail, existing partnerships. I mean, or a multi-phase project.
Yeah.
So you're not necessarily going to have new partnerships. but you're
I like
continuing.
that
Relation, expanding, enhancing.
So instead of creates new, the new language might read, describe the ways in which the project promotes partnerships between trail users, private interests and public.
That's a good way to
Yeah.
keep it succinct without adding a lot of
Yeah.
words.
And then 6B, describe the business, public health, workforce development, and quality of life impacts of your project. And this is another opportunity for folks to just build the case that it's not just what it looks like. If it is a latrine, the public health impacts are that people are actually using the proper space. It's still gonna be an overcrowded trailhead, but at least there's not gonna be TP scattered all across it. Big public health benefit right there. And then also a quality of life impact. And so it's their opportunity to say, on the surface, it might look like it's just a clear cut and dry project, but here are these added benefits that are kind of underneath the surface.
So this is where we were talking yesterday under community development, where you may want to have a sub bullet like you did under B in question 3. You might want to have a 6A one where it offers them the opportunity to upload a letter of support.
Well, and more than just a letter of support that specifies.
Yeah, I
that
mean,
support, not that it's just
you
rah-rah
could
support.
word the upload a letter of support that indicates buy-in into the project from your partner or something, that really
Well, I think
hones
it's,
in on what you want instead of, I don't want 100 letters of support just telling me that Bob is a great guy.
like, you're right, the bullet under B at the top.
Yeah.
The commitment.
But that, I mean, if that's, I still think letters of support for grants are a good thing because they do illustrate directly that somebody signed on a line to say, yeah, I know about this and I support it. So
That's great. Yeah, I think that will align with, because it gives them an opportunity to say, this is helping such and so business, please find attached letter of support. And then we look at the letter of support and it's clear that such and such business is aware of the project,
yeah,
of the components of the projects that they're being.
it's evidence. Yeah, good.
All right, well, moving to section 7. Big one here, connectivity, mitigation and maintenance. I love it.
Yay, let's just move on.
7A, describe how the project helps improve connections or linkages to other trails, natural or scenic corridors, cultural, historical resources, or other outdoor recreation infrastructure. Kent, going back to your description of this now provides access to 10,000 acres of, I think that's, now it's not just linkages of trail to trail or road to trail. It's linkages to landscapes. And so if the project involves an easement, it can say, it's not connecting to another trail, but it's getting folks across a 1.5 mile easement to then open up access to 20,000 acres that had previously not been.
Right.
So I think in that sense, connectivity at this point, we're not just thinking about it solely in terms of trail to trail, but we're thinking about it in terms of linking access of landscape to landscape. And so I think it, broadens, and maybe connectivity, I think, well, we could probably talk all day about this, but maybe it's not the right phrase, maybe it is the right phrase, but I think this question allows folks to realize that it's not just connectivity from trail corridor to trail corridor, it's from recreational infrastructure to recreational.
I'm not good at wordsmithing, connectivity to areas. I mean, somewhere wording in there that you are connecting folks, and I think you said it, to landscapes.
Right, scenic or cultural resources.
Yeah.
I think this is where we do need to put in that and or between mitigation and maintenance.
In the heading, connectivity and or mitigation and or maintenance. 7B, describe how the project helps mitigate and minimize negative impacts to the natural environment. I think this is also a question that we could find out, is this, are they stretching here? Are they, and this kind of a quality assurance question too.
I guess I would say, it's like, if appropriate, it might. I mean, there may be projects that don't mitigate any negative impact.
Well, that should be taken into account. then.
Right, so I mean, does, I'm just trying to think of an example, but it just seems like there could be a area where it's like.
And that's fine in that, but
I think that's what the and or for.
Yeah.
You can do NA,
Exactly,
A,
right.
and B, and then your response is C. So you're not having, I think the and or gives you that as the applicant indicates you don't have to have all three. You can have all.
yeah.
Alice is asking a question.
Oh, Alice, go ahead.
So just related to this one, and I think I kind of wanted to pipe in a little earlier, but I wanted to wait till we got down here. I appreciate when I'm reviewing these that they don't repeat or put in stuff just because there's a heading for it. So I like the and or, and if it doesn't apply, don't make something up for it. And because one of the things when we're reading these, and I know you all get this because we've all had to do this, you get to the overview, you've read the whole project, then you get to the project plan, they talk the whole project. And sometimes they're just repeating themselves. And I think any way to limit the repeat will help us get through these, but it's unnecessary. We don't need them to invent something for mitigation or invent, connectivity. As I was listening to you talk about it, it sounded a little bit, there's nothing that's not going to fill in that blank. I mean, everything is, got some connectivity to something. If they're going to if they feel like they have to fill these out, they're, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
I think you get a good project overview, and then if there is, put it in. If there's not, don't wordsmith what you've already done just so that you can fill in this blank.
That's where I feel like 3C and 7A are gonna get the same answer copied in.
Well, I think you might get that in the overview too. And anyway, for what it's worth, I mean, it happens. I don't know how you prevent it, but I think in the outreach part, it might be, appropriate to say, we've got people reading these on the other end, and to just repeat yourself kind of doesn't make any sense.
Well,
You know,
do
keep-
that technical assistance.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
succinct is better, and your word limit.
We
will
we
help.
would definitely word limit this section in particular. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think word limits will help us, Alice. I mean,
Uh-huh.
they had word limits before, maybe.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
So, well, and then I think the other feature or function of this section 2 is to prompt the application into thinking about these larger item tickets. And so maybe they hadn't thought about connectivity until they were prompted. So at the very least, we're saying, hey, we do want you to be thinking of the bigger picture beyond just the trail corridor scope of it. And so, I think there's some value into asking folks to think about connectivity, to think about resource mitigation, and to think about long-term maintenance. So it's particularly 7C, describe the ongoing maintenance necessary to sustain the improvements of this project following its completion. It's kind of saying, for us, it's saying, we just want to make sure that after we make this investment, you have the plan necessary to keep the value of that investment up. We don't want to invest in a project that after 3 years, they have no plan and they run out of funding, and then all of a sudden we sunk $75,000 into a project that 4 years later is defunct. So it's asking folks to really take a little bit more time beyond just the project scope to think about how are you gonna sustain this? Because we want to make sure we're investing in something that's gonna be around for many, many years, not just be a feel-good story for 2 years and then be closed out.
Well, and this might be an opportunity for them to talk about how those partners help them with, right? You know, this is why we partnered with the county,
Mhm.
because they have the trail maintenance, you know, equipment needed to keep the trail maintained. So it's an opportunity for them to also think beyond their own selves and how they need to build their partnerships.
So on the flip side of that, what would we expect a snow grooming answer to be in that case? I mean, it's like, yeah, this is an annual. You know,
You tell me, I don't know what they would say,
Well,
but we
but I mean-
do want them thinking about this long-term.
We do,
because
but
it
that's,
might
you know,
involve
so-
alternative funding sources.
Well, and yeah, there are other grants, but they, you know, they have to pay because the counties do not support.
No, I
any
know
of it.
that,
Yeah,
but there's
yeah,
also
it's like,
these user
Right,
groups,
yeah.
there's
Well, we
user
want
groups
to
that.
Oh, yeah, and then that's what they do, but it's like you know, again, whenever you have a recurring, you know, cost going through,
Yeah.
Western Gallatin does trail maintenance on 400 miles of trails every year. And it's like, so I'm kind of like, all right, I'm just thinking in terms of how does that penalize somebody that has to do this every year? You know,
Well, it's not,
snowball,
it's kind of
snowball
something that
every year.
strategically, it's not saying, it's saying the well's here and it's full right now, but what are you gonna do if the well runs dry?
Yeah.
What's your alternative plan? And we wanna see that people are thinking about
I
an
agree.
alternative plan.
And we do, but I'm just saying, it's like, you know, the hard part is you know, the snow comes down every single year and the trail has to be groomed every year, otherwise there is no. Yeah, you're right, yeah, it's like, you don't have a cross-country ski trail if you don't groom.
Well, and I think that's the opportunity for an organization to say, we're working with the local Department of Commerce because we've had economic studies that say each winter we bring in this amount of tourists to Cook City and it generates this amount of money. And now it's within the interest of the Department of Commerce to support that happening. And we say, great, that's great. That's wonderful to hear. And like, we want to do everything we can to support that partnership because that could add funding to this. And we're glad you're thinking about this.
Okay. All right, well, like I said, I just like.
Yeah, I don't think it necessarily, because you said the keywords of how this might penalize them. And I don't think trail grooming, I don't think it would penalize them. It's just asking them for thinking.
I think it's, I mean, these are all recreation benefit, community development, connectivity, mitigation, maintenance, and or are all opportunities for people to gain points, not lose them.
Yeah, okay.
But where I think and we'll, in the rubric, when we go over this next, where folks are gonna lose points and where it's justified is their project plan and project implementation. That's when the points are being taken off the table because their project plan and the implementation is not as strong as it needs to be in order for this to be a sound investment. And then on the flip side, the benefits approach of recreation, community, and CMM, to just create another acronym for everybody. That's the benefit. Now those are the added bonus points to say, well, now we've seen the project plan, we see your implementation strategy, and now we're realizing the bigger scope.
Your questions B and C are really centered around trail sustainability. And B, in my mind, B is about, I think, environmental sustainability. And C is about financial sustainability. So, and I'm not suggesting change it, but, you know, I think talking about trail sustainability is a good thing. It's just, you know, I get it that you don't want to penalize, some things are just recurring. And I'm going to say a territory, that you have to go back every year, either in the back country you're using the crosscut saw or the front country you chainsaw, you've got to open the trail.
Yeah.
Stuff falls down. And so the sustainable piece is saying if you want to maintain, I mean, to me, the sustainable, if you want to maintain access, you have to have the ability to maintain the trail. And so, again, it's just those components of sustainability that if you want access, you have to do basic maintenance, even on existing trails.
Yep.
I'm not helping much. But
No, you are. Here's I think that trail sustainability, what if we just change section 7 from connectivity and or mitigation to and or maintenance to section 7 trail sustainability. And then these 3 questions fall underneath it.
That, and that's gonna go to the stack. I mean, I'm not technically understood.
Because connections or linkages to other trails, natural scenic corridors, cultural historic resource, and other outdoor recreation infrastructure isn't the same type of sustainability as maintenance and natural resource mitigation, but it is sustaining connections across landscape and it's sustaining access.
That's your social sustainability.
Yes, social sustainability.
I think if you look at A, that's your social sustainability because people want that. You know, people want to get to the corridor, people want to get to see something, people want to use those acreages that they're snowmobiling. So whatever that is, that's your social to me.
And would we want to add the trail and social sustainability in the section, or does trail sustainability accurately capture these 3 components kind of based on what we're talking about? Alice, I see your hands up. Can't hear you.
Sorry about that, because I think I never lowered it from the last time.
Oh. Thoughts on changing this to trail sustainability as a title? Because then it would, then the scoring criteria would change. This bottom section would say trail sustainability instead of this.
I think that makes sense. I don't want to lose the addition that we made with the and or, so that the writer, the grant applicant, understands very clearly that an NA in.
I would rather see sustainability added to the verbiage, not
The
so
description.
much the title.
Yeah, I like the,
I think the title's fine. I think it's just, yeah, but I think sustainability is a great word inside that verbiage.
I agree, because I think it's one of those things that some of the applicants don't think about as they're filling out these applications is, you know, what certain types of trails take to maintain them in the sustainability, maybe maintenance every year. It may be maintenance every 10 years. It may be do it once and forever, but it makes them think about sustainability. I like that word too.
but he does use sustain in C. But maybe just in the, are you just saying add it to the description, or are you saying add it to the question? What do we?
I think my thought is add it to the description, because the maintenance part will directly answer that thought that's in there, you know, that's there in the description.
Yeah, you could say presents that, I can't quite see it, but something about maintenance and sustainability needs of the project, something like that.
Okay. All right, but we want to keep connectivity and or mitigation and or maintenance,
Yeah,
as opposed to moving that to trail sustainability.
Yeah.
All right.
because I think trail sustainability doesn't describe connectivity.
I agree.
Well, that's the application. Yeah, and it looks like there's just really minor changes, which is great. So do we want to go right into the rubric or take a 5-minute break and then come back and tackle the rubric? Good, we'll keep it going.
Keep it going.
I just got one quick question, going back, sorry to bring this up, but going back to 3C. Describe how this project improves public access to the outdoors. I think that's great, keep it in there, but, this might be a problem with how I define the word improves, but should it read, describe how this project improves or maintains public access to the outdoors? And again, I don't want to, this is a question really for the you guys running the program in Stack. we have definitions of improvement versus maintenance. I may be getting, just a question.
No, I think that's fair, because folks might look at that and say, well, it doesn't improve anything, it just sustains the access we've already had that it's threatening to be lost.
Yeah, especially like some of those applicants in the backcountry where
Yeah.
the trees had fallen for many years and
But
people can still hop over the trees, but by cutting them out and clearing the trail, it
Yeah.
maintains it.
yeah,
I don't think that's a huge tweak and I like it.
okay, so just moving to page 15 in the packet. And the question is, I mean, we'll kind of want to look back to the application and these, but I think this is what will be in front of the stack scoring group come next spring. And so this rubric will be turned into a fillable, it'll look similar, but slightly different to this, and it will have the ability to walk through the application, which we just went through, section 1A, B, 3C. And then here is where the scoring takes place.
So are we deleting the question that says, are you okay with partial funding?
Oh, no.
That's still part of the,
Yeah, that should be good.
not in here, but
No. So that would be
I think it should be in there.
just right
Would it
off
be
the
under-
bat, right off the bat.
Would it be, yeah, right at the top?
Yeah, I mean, you can put it under grant history or project plan.
Maybe one D could be if awarded, would you accept?
Whatever it is today is fine, but yeah, it's like, yeah, I just wanted to make sure that was still in there.
Okay, and that would be a scoreless answer.
Yeah.
That's,
Yeah, I think that's right at the top. Yes, no.
Mhm.
1D.
Okay, so
Good catch.
Sorry.
And here's a question with grant history. I'm wondering if as members of the staff, do you think you would have enough information to actually like honestly score whether grant history, yes, minor compliance issues such as one late report.
We rely on you to
Right.
tell us if there were problems in the reporting, because we don't have access to that data.
Right. So then I guess this grant history section would be for the internal review panel.
Yes.
Fine.
And we would be able to kind of provide that because we would be able to provide that as a context with them.
So I do have a question on that. I mean, I agree with what you're saying, Mark, but we as the public should have access to anything, right? Any of those reports? That's my thought on whether.
Yeah, I think technically it would potentially involve a public records request, which would
Yeah.
take forever, but we,
A temporary password or something.
Yeah.
to Go on the previous record.
A lot of times though, it's
Yeah.
really just like Tom has to send a, quick email to somebody
Yeah.
saying like, hey, the timeline, deadline's approaching, you need to, and if they go.
No, I'm
back,
just saying that because this is a public meeting and I'm almost positive. For example, my budget the budget for Southeast Montana comes from lodging tax.
yes,
And that is all public record and legislators do look at those.
so,
And anyone in the public of Montana, I believe, can look at those.
right.
So I just wanted to verify that statement that we don't have access. We do.
I think comparatively speaking, the public won't have access to the back end of web grants. They would need to request information on a very specific grant and their history, and then the agency would have to take the time to turn that into a public records
But the
formal.
completion report should be in there and available.
Yes, it would take a little bit of time to dig it out and then reformat it,
I
but
don't want to overkill. I just wanted to make sure that.
no, I mean, there's a public records request renaissance taking place, and I think there's a lot of, that's very justified across a lot of realms, but I think it's also takes a lot of time and resources, and so.
Takes a lot of time to make the reports.
Right. Okay, so grant history, that makes sense. That'll be scored internally and then that communicated to the stack. So then now we move really into project plan, because section 2 is not gradable, it's just title and overview. So now it's a little tricky to just go from these questions into the rubric, because now they're on different pages. We're on page 12 with the application, and now
Page 15.
and I don't think we need to go question by question, but if, because we just did go question by question, but we'll start by saying project plan, describe the location and physical traits. A 5-point score for this project plan 3A question is timeline is well developed, feasible, operates within the grant period, and delineates all major project and grant management needs. And this is kind of where the scorer's discretion comes in. And correct me if I'm wrong, but this is a systematic improvement of last year, where folks, was this rubric available?
We never scored this way. We just read, and we were given a 1 to 10 score in the past.
Yeah.
So
I created
overall-
my own rubric.
Okay.
And I scored them in my own rubric
Uh-huh.
and then adjusted them based on like, my own internal.
And so-
assessment.
So the goal here, this rubric is not perfect by any means, but it's standardized.
I
It
love it.
removes subjectivity from the scoring individuals, and it's systematic. And so that we can look at it, and it's not going to be clear cut. There is still going to be some subjective opinion across this, but at least there's some parameters. And then when we do go back and we wonder, why is it that for one scorer, section 3A, someone gave it a 5 and another person gave it a 2, that would just signal a red flag to say this needs to be talked about.
Right,
We've identified the inconsistency. But
What did
it's
you
just a
see
guide.
in that application that I didn't see,
Right.
right? Yeah.
And that warrants a really productive, healthy conversation across the award
Yeah.
panel.
Agree. I like the rubric. It really helps. It really helps to know that I'm measuring things on the same components that the staff did,
Mhm.
as well as,
Mhm.
other staff members.
And then we can look at the spreadsheet next April and say, well, at least we all approached it, all the scores up there kind of are coming from the same lens-ish. Like we all bring our own,
And we can
Initial-
tweak next year, we might, at this meeting, might be looking at tweaking some of the rubric
yes,
for the following.
yeah. And I think today is to flag any major concerns if we see in here.
Another one that maybe it's in here, correct me if I'm wrong, matching funds. Is there,
That would be in the summary budget,
which is what section?
section 4.
Okay, so the
C.
budget,
Or
all right, so in that case though, in years past, we had discussions as a staff to say, did they have real match? Did they have adequate match? Where is the match coming from?
Yeah.
Was it all volunteer hours match versus real cash match? Cash counted more in most people's heads than just counting volunteer hours. So we haven't accounted for any of that. And it's like, I'm just throwing it out there because I'm just saying what was historical. But I do know that in the past, a lot of people looked at that match, source and gave higher points based on, real cash.
So 4C in the application says provide a summary budget with outline the funding request for the proposed project and details, and I'll add in and details match amounts.
And the budget has, the budget spreadsheet that they fill out in web grants does have the
Yeah.
columns for match and all that, so you've seen that.
And so to your point, Mark, then in 4C in the scoring rubric, a 5-point answer says the summary budget is detailed, well-researched and realistic. And we then should start adding something about match in here too.
Something like detailed, well-researched, provides information about the match.
is this, I don't know if this is an appropriate time to mention, like, I remember, and I've only done reviews one time, and there were a lot of them, that some of the applicants, or a significant number, were looking at the federal program as the match dollar for this program. Does that seem, did I remember that correctly? Am I not?
They can do
I
that.
think it's vice versa.
Or vice
Yeah.
versa?
Usually they use
can
the,
use state
this
funds.
grant
This one,
to
okay.
do the 20% match
Yes.
RTP or match for.
Is that,
trail.
is that of significance to this rubric? Particularly if someone is funded partially.
I don't know, I think that
This
we
is
would
where I think.
be able to
we
find a little bit of that in grant history and then be able to do some research. But I don't know if that's.
I don't know if it should score
like a
them lower.
PR.
I think
Does it matter?
it's just really important that we understand
Right.
that they have real needs. You know, and again, sometimes just, I don't mind counting volunteer hours. I know tons of volunteer hours are counted for, you know, for lots of different things. That's fine. It's just, sometimes it's nice to see sort of a mix, but, you know.
Well, and where would, but
I don't
where
think
in
anybody
the
should.
application, sorry to interrupt you. Where in the application would it say if this grant was being used towards a match towards another?
There was the question, section.
I'm sorry, baby.
It says 1C is the proposed project being used as.
Oh, yeah,
match.
there it is.
Yeah.
Right. I thought we asked it.
Yep, so,
Okay.
so they'll tell us there.
But, well, so here's a question. Max award for trail stewardship is $75,000, 10%, 7,500. Do we think that someone who's matching above 10% should be graded, should get more points for that? What if their match is 20% and it's only a minimum of 10%? That's not, should you have,
Because I'm also thinking on the side of the ones that have,
They
they're
can't.
scraping by to
Yep,
get
okay.
that 10%.
That,
They
and
shouldn't be penalized for only having the minimum.
I remember Michelle asking, putting in her instructions in the recent years, saying, please don't add extra match. It's like, make it exact for us because it's harder on YouTube.
I think for RTP at least, like,
Yeah.
great if you wanna include extra match, but when it comes to federal highways, they don't care.
Right.
And we actually can't report it over the 20%.
So it became,
So I think that's where that.
it was a
came
sticking,
from.
yeah.
Cause then we had to go through and do like, oh, what's actually.
Yeah.
well, that's super helpful because we don't want to, take it, if an organization can't go beyond 10% of the match, they shouldn't be penalized. They're hitting the necessary.
they're good.
In the job. Great, that's good clarifying perspective.
But again, I guess, as in your rubric, I think 4C should probably just, or maybe just a 4, I guess 4C, just to, say, is the match there?
Yep.
Does it sound realistic?
Yeah, and I mean, and I kind of going back to that, this is a standardized guide to help us out. If we look at a 5-point answer, the summary budget is detailed, well-researched, and realistic. We'll include something match language. That's a 5-point. To a 4-point, the summary budget is detailed and realistic. That's the subjectivity of the grader. And I think that's fine. I think it's a step in the right direction compared to last year where there wasn't a difference. The 5 and the 4, the grader had to decide just kind of based on there was no shared guide to how that could be interpreted. But I just want to put that out there because I just want us all to kind of know and agree that this is supposed to standardize and provide some systematic structure, but there's still going to be the grader's own subjective opinion. Wow, how do I know if it was well researched? It's just a 4. That's fine, but we're giving folks the opportunity to, if it is a 5, to then when we do come to it and someone, if only one person graded it as a 5 and everyone else graded it as 3, it's an opportunity to say, well, what about this was well researched? What about this was detailed? Because no one else interpreted it.
I think this is where we're going to see just based again off of 1 year reviewing, there were some applicants that were very obviously professional grant writers. And that's where we're gonna see the difference between these two. And that's a hard one to really figure out how to level that playing field
Yeah.
for the entities that are, you know, certification, or they, you know, this is just one of a million things they do as a government employee.
There's a lot of geriatric people filling these.
Yes,
jobs, Trying
there
to figure
are.
out
I mean,
how
I
to
have
turn their
seen-
computer on. and
Yes,
Get into web
yes,
grants.
whether,
and
you
navigate
know,
it. I mean, it
a
is.
professional
tough.
writer is gonna
Yeah.
just blow that thing right out. So I don't know, I mean, it's hard, I think, on our side of this, how to give credit where credit is due.
Right. You don't want to penalize someone for being a professional grant writer.
No, nor do you want to penalize the other side of it for not. So, I mean, maybe that's what comes out during our conversations.
Yeah.
I don't. Or maybe that's what comes out in some of the goals of, you know, are we trying to have X number of the awardees be newbies? You know, that's not fair either.
Right.
You know, it's just something
But
that's
then,
really kind of stuck with me since last April.
and I think it's go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, I don't know how you plan on running TSB for at least RTP. I was talking with FACB about.
You're gonna have to speak up, I'm sure. that
Oh,
people
sorry.
can't hear you.
I was saying, I don't know how TSB is gonna be ran, but for at least for RTP, I was talking with FACB about. For at least some allotted amount of time during the application period, making it known that applicants can reach out for feedback on their application. So if they are new, and I've done this with other programs and it's helpful. I can say like, this needs more detail. You know, I'm not gonna like write it for them, but I can say like, this needs more detail. Or like, can you expand on this? Or just little things there. Cause that to some level, when it comes to grant writing, like you have to play the game. Right, a little bit, you know.
It's true, but you know, the rookie at bats can be way different than the veteran.
But hopefully just like saying we're an open door for at least a period of time, like
Definitely.
if you don't know how to do this, like
Yep.
please come talk to us.
Ask.
And making sure we're advertising that support, you know.
I think that's important, and I did that in my job, and how many grants I've been given to review over 6 years, probably 2. And I probably write, like I said, 12 to 24 letters of support per tourism grant. I mean, people just don't do it. They're doing it at the last minute. I don't know, it's the system. Yeah, I don't know how we fix that.
And I think this is a conversation that will be ongoing because one, it is a competitive grant program. And two, if someone didn't put in the time, energy, and effort, whether they have the know-how or not, to write a good summary budget, then
They implement
it's
it.
not a good investment if it's not there. And so opening the door for technical assistance and making sure folks know that, you know, these are due at the end of January, and if you feel as though you need extra assistance and want some review or guidance, we're here. But at the end of the day, this scoring rubric is we're scoring whether or not this is a project we want to invest in. And if that summary budget isn't up to snuff, then it's signaling that it's not a good investment, I suppose.
So, can we go back to, are we done? with this
Yes.
conversation? Okay, so I just wanted to say under 3C, we just need to add improves or maintains to all of the different rubrics based on changing the question.
Good.
Yeah, and then add that matched for C and then.
Anybody on Zoom, have any thoughts as we're walking through this? Not to put anybody on the spot, but I don't want to.
I'm on board. I'm following what you're doing. This sounds good.
Great, thanks, Alice. Okay, so. Go ahead. Right.
I was just unmuting and then saying I'm fine too. I'm on board.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, as folks are reading through, if you just want to bring up any areas.
Well, just along with what Jenny was saying, basically the changes we made on the, you know, kind of the outline, you're just gonna automatically bring those over to the rubric overall. Yeah. So I guess under 7, so with our changes to the and or. I'm concerned about the 7A, 7B, 7C. If someone has an NA in their application,
No answer.
no answer, they shouldn't. If there's an NA in all three, it
Is
should
it
equal
no
zero.
answer or is it not applicable?
Yeah, not.
NA is no answer. Well, up here, you can see NA, no answer.
Okay, so we're going back to seven, the questions, we're back to the connectivity mitigation and or maintenance. We're the snowmobile trail, or we're the, the ski trail. And we're basically only doing C, our applications for maintenance. We're gonna get a 0 on 7A and 7B.
Do we
How
want
do
to
we
change
fix-
the scoring for this section in particular then?
Well, I don't know how to, yes, we would have to, they can't be penalized for an NA unless it's an NA in A, B, and C.
It's almost like you either have multiple totals, because if you have the or, or you have the and or, they can answer all three and get points.
Yeah,
Or
they can
because
get
you have
15
the and
points.
or they can answer just one. I think they would answer at least one.
Yeah.
And they would have less points. So there's gonna have to be some leveling
Yeah.
there somehow, if you retain it the
Formula.
way it is, the and or.
Yeah.
Some kind of formula.
I hear all of this. I'm just concerned for moving to the final section and completely changing the scoring component. Like, how can we justify just
Well,
all of
maybe
a
they
sudden
get
saying, no, you don't have
max-
to answer this question, even though it's a part of the
The
application.
max it can get in here is 5. So maybe if they answer all three, you take the average of the 3,
Okay,
average score of 3, and if they answer 2, you take the average score of 2. If they answer 1, you get the score of 1.
okay. And we don't,
And
and
you're
I
not
know.
allowing zeros.
We don't want to do this with the community development or recreational benefit. We think that those sections are different, that we think that connectivity and or mitigation and or maintenance is that unique that it deserves its own scoring.
Why would
adjustment.
you take the average and not the high? I'm just asking.
That's a good
Because it's an and or, if you write an and or,
Right.
then you take the highest of any one of them.
And maybe we do that, I don't know, but I can't
Um,
see getting 0, 0 and a 5
Because I mean,
and only getting
yeah.
5 versus 15.
I
That's
just,
gonna mess
I
up
just
everything.
put my hat on and try to say like, if I was a lawyer and you said and or on each one of those, I would say, I only need to give an answer on one.
And
Which is what we're saying,
yeah,
So then you should take the highest of any one of those
maybe.
in that section.
that makes sense. You need, I mean, it needs to be doable from your end, otherwise you could create 3 different total scores. by the time you measure them. So
Well, it needs to be explained in some sort of way too, so that we've covered our assets to say, hey, I spent 4 hours on this connectivity answer. And I just found out that it wasn't rated the same way as the community development recreation benefit project was. And so I think we need to maintain our consistency within the score as well.
Agreed.
I mean, I guess the other side of that is not a no answer, but a not applicable. Yeah, I guess, in that section, where you have somebody, you give them the option to say, we don't feel this is applicable to our project, or.
Yeah.
Do you think maybe you should?
Then those points, I guess they're.
I mean, I would think that you would want them to at least answer 2 of the 3. I would think, in almost every, because if you put it through the snowmobile or the sign application, they both meet at least 2 of the 3. So you could say in your directions, you must answer, at least 2 of the 3. You must meet at least 2 of the 3.
Okay, and then there's a 10-point max there. And we just, well, because I'm also thinking about, and I don't have it on hand, but last year's scoring criteria, connectivity was its own.
Right,
It's connectivity has been established as a priority.
right.
And so to me, it doesn't seem like an and/or, it seems like it was established as it is important that connectivity is a part of these projects. As well with mitigation and as well as long-term maintenance.
And I like the way we reworded that to, potentially, I don't know if we decided that 3A or 7A was gonna have the words area or acreages in it, but I made a note to, bring back to the motorized community that they need to talk about that.
Yeah, or I think
you
link to
know.
landscapes was one of them.
Landscape.
Yeah, right, and it's like, if we're getting, if that's the way that question is being looked at, that group, those groups can figure out a way to answer that
Yeah, exactly,
in a way that says, yeah, I'm connecting big acreage here.
right. I'm
So
connected to
that's,
scenic vistas and.
I see a path forward for these groups now to get to a scoring answer.
Right. Okay, great. Cool, because the same is with mitigation, because it's,
Yeah,
if a project doesn't mitigate impacts to the natural environment, is it?
if you're not on the
funded?
trail, you might be, if there wasn't a trail and you're not on it, then, people could just be,
All over the place,
right.
yeah.
And the long-term maintenance is that long-term investment, is this investment gonna hold up?
Stewardship.
So are we kind of saying that these are all still in play to be now rated the same? Or do we wanna create some sort of scale for this? Because I think connectivity, mitigation and maintenance they were part of the old scoring criteria. They've
But
been
does the
part of
sign-
the
But
new.
does the sign example work?
If they could say the signs are keeping people on trail, therefore,
Well, that
Mitigating
mitigates, but does it create, it doesn't create.
So this is where I
Like,
get
you're
on
like
this
creating
one, I think by saying,
directional
we will take the top two
information.
scores out of this section to give you a total score.
Just said.
So if you have one that's low, we throw it out.
So you're saying max of 10 points?
Max of 10 points,
rather than 50.
right?
Can you say that? Can you summarize that one more time?
Yeah.
So you get you have a max of 10 points in section 7, meaning you will take the top two scores and throw out the low score.
So with that, you would probably need to take out the end. Right, because you're asking for them to really answer all
But it's
three.
and or for any of those three. You're gonna write to your two strong points, you're gonna answer all three probably. And you're going to, I think it's just training on this one to give them a good paragraph on, here's how we deal with this.
I know a couple of our folks, ones I can think of, they will answer all three.
Oh,
And probably most will, so they can get if they can get
Just
the
in
10,
case.
if they can get the 10, they get the 10, yeah.
So, let me know when we're done with this, because I want to point something out on 5B.
But I think that gives a very fair way, in case there is some grant that doesn't, meet one of these A, B, or C's.
Well, and we can
So-
always tweak it. Let's see how it goes,
Yeah.
Tom, and
Mhm.
if you feel like it's not working.
Yep.
It's
All right,
your,
I
it's
think
your,
this
it's
is-
your program.
It's nothing saying that you get to the end point after reviewing all the grants and you go, this section is just, throw it out, for this one round. It doesn't matter. You guys have the power to, not use the section anymore.
And I think what we're all focusing on right now is that we just want to be consistent. And so we're trying to figure out this consistency, taking into account that not all projects.
Give it a whirl, yeah.
Check all the boxes. Ginny 5B.
Sorry, Stephanie, I like this for our team.
I think
Oh,
it's 6B, actually, sorry. You have it on.
Oh,
there,
God, I
so
see that, yeah.
6B under community development. So the way the question is worded, does business, public health, workforce development, and quality of life impacts? And then the way the rubric scores it is only on economic impacts. So I feel like we need to have social and or economic impacts.
3 or more positive social and or economic impacts.
Yeah. Don't you? I mean,
Yeah. Okay, so social and
you can't
economic.
just limit it on economic.
Right.
We're asking them to answer about health, or,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. there's some
quality of
social-
life.
social components.
Yeah.
And this is just, I think, Tom, you've probably seen this in the past, but, we have seen a ton of grants come through talking about the health benefits of walking.
Yeah.
And that one would just kind of.
If they could cite research, that would be helpful, but if
They
they're just
do,
gonna
and
say
they
it-
do, but it's like, I mean, there's tons of research that says this, but it's like, okay, we get that, but there's got to be something a little bit more, you know, to that grant, you know, than just the fact that walking is good, you know, it's like, Alice, I don't know, I just remember in years past us talking about like, come on, you know.
Yeah. Well, I think part of that answer too could be described the business, public health, or quality of life impacts. Folks could say, this path, now that it will be paved, will allow an intergenerational user groups to be together safely and healthily. And then, so that's the social benefit of grandparents and grandchildren and parents can all be on this now because it's wider, it's smoother, and there's your social benefit. In addition to the fact that walking is. So beyond just physical health.
I think what Mark's referring to is we had, at the first year we were doing this, we had folks spend paragraph telling us about the health benefits of exercise. And it was overdone. So I think if, again, if we're getting out there and telling folks, you know, what we need, what we don't need like a dissertation on the health, you know, effects of getting out and walking and hiking. So, but I like the social aspect of really being able to say that a trail, the intergenerational usability of a trail is actually a pretty big deal, because there's a lot of trails that I can go on that I can't take my parents on. So I think that's important. But I know what Mark's talking about. There was some folks were going just overboard with trying to describe the benefits, the health benefits and the mental benefits. And we don't need that kind of, like, you know, dissertation on that. The fact that it can, that it's wider, or that it's easier, or that it's wheelchair accessible, that part is important.
And ideally, word limits will help with that too, because if someone does want to just tell all about the health benefits of walking,
Yes.
then
They use up
they'll
their,
get graded lower because it's an opportunity to go beyond that.
Perfect.
Well, great. I think
Yeah, if we come back and you've got these scored, hand this to us and we can then review them and see how, you know, that makes our job easier, and we can help weed out and reorganize the pecking order a little bit easier.
and that's ideally the goal of this rubric. And then it'll allow us, when we do have differences of opinion in the review, we can go to the scoring rubric and then kind of figure out where those differences among the committee lie, and then have a fruitful discussion about that, rather than leaving it, because there's objective measures that are helping to guide that, rather than just leaving it to our own personal opinions without the scaffolding of the review.
Stephanie, do you ever break down the grants for RTP for this group? Just for us to see, because like, it was really helpful what Tom provided in showing, like, you know, the amount of funding available and how much went to motorized, non-motorized, you know, that kind of breakdown, and who received them. Do you ever provide that, or would you provide that information
Yeah,
to the
I
staff?
can totally provide that information. I just have a much larger database to come through.
Right.
So,
Right.
but I can't, like.
I mean, I would just go back you know, 2 years, 3 years, just to have some idea of how the two grant programs are similar and different in terms of what they're funding and who they're funding.
I mean, one of the things you could do that's pretty easy, I think, is if you've got the final scorings and awards of the set, you would, you know, we could see from that who's motorized, who's not motorized, who's, you know, diversified, and what the grants were, you know, they're, that, those lists are, you know.
I think it'd just be, it's good for us to be able to get a fuller picture between the two grant programs, and then it would be also great to have in the future, you know, a presentation by MDT of how transportation enhancements has been used in the state. Just really, again, because MDT doesn't have a group like this that I know of. So, you know, it would be probably helpful for Shelby to do her job, to also have an understanding of how transportation alternatives looks and acts differently in comparison to these smaller funding pots.
Are there grants that go out for some of this stuff? I thought there were. Or there have been in the past, right? Yeah. So just being able to see what's gone out the door from those programs would be helpful.
I can probably.
The nice part there would be that way when we're reviewing a grant and we're kind of scratching our head like, this really sounds like it's MD, you know, we could kind of compare to what was out there and say, you might want to go over to MDT.
Well, remember that one grant that we got from Billings, and it was funding less than a mile of the trail, and we were all thinking, this could be a transportation alternatives grant because it's so expensive per mile, but maybe they couldn't go to transportation alternatives. So, yeah, I think it.
So, because it was within a park.
Yeah, so, and you know, there's certain things that TAP won't fund. It won't fund backcountry projects and things like that, but it will also help us, like, there was also that, was in a Lewistown urban trail that we were looking at. And so
Awesome trail.
yeah, that it is. So, yeah, I just think it would be great for us to have an understanding of the three programs, what they're funding. It just gives us.
Shelby was telling us during the break, though, they're reorganizing it. They used to be that in order to connect certain things, it had to be within 3 miles of city center. Now it can be 6 miles. I guess.
When our
So,
policies.
yeah,
We're doing.
when that picks up.
Yay,
So-
that's
So
good.
that'll be.
Yeah.
so small steps
I
like
know
that.
some of those limitations that were put on TAP by the state. were
That's a huge, yeah, not bad.
difficult, yeah.
And I am gonna collaborate with Tom, you know, everyone, so give him more info for TAP to add to the website that will be distributed to you guys as well. So I mean, that will come, it's just all in time. There's been a lot of turnover, as everyone knows, within all stages. So we are slowly but surely they're becoming a bit more stable year to year, so, yeah.
No, it's all good.
So one more quick question on the rubric.
Yes.
I'm slow, so I'm gonna go all the way back to 1B. But just a quick question, I get, and maybe I'm missing something, but 1B, so you give 5 points for not having a previous grant. And then you seem to, it seems to like be a reward that you had last year's grant. Further, it almost seems like if you're trying to, I guess I'm confused.
Yeah.
Why would you give 4 to last year, 3 to 2 years ago, but then you're giving 5 points to someone who doesn't? It almost seems like that.
It could be inverted. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
So, yeah, and I mean, there are quite a few of our grant applicants that apply for RTP every year.
Serial.
And so they're gonna get 0 points.
Yeah.
And this is gonna take that group of snowmobile people and cross-country ski people and slide them flat.
Maybe this doesn't need a score.
Yeah,
It's
I don't
just
think so.
purely informational.
Yeah,
Right.
I would
And then-
rather,
and then
I
we
would
need
rather.
background to say.
I was thinking. of-
Stack. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just thinking like for mine, Cause I was looking at, cause I think I have the same thing for mine right now too, but I was kind of thinking of just moving that information to like,
Up
as
above.
far as compliance, it's more like eligibility review stuff, and then this one. Yeah, I was gonna go back to FACP to see if that was necessary, just.
Yeah, I'd prefer it just to be informational,
Just contact.
like,
Yeah.
like 1C.
I mean, it
Yeah, I
really
think that's
matches the same, because
very
it's either
doable.
yes or no.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
informational, it's not scorable.
Yeah, I think it's just, providing more background on the applicant. But yes, should this be the same weight as project plan grade? Probably not. No, I think that makes a lot of sense.
So, I think earlier you said that the top 4 questions are gonna be weighted heavier than, right? You're gonna double those scores or
I think
something?
that was a question.
I think,
To us, saying, what do we want?
yeah, I think part of the question is,
For the top 4 section.
well, I'm gonna reshare. So I think, I'm not gonna be able to highlight here. But, yeah, I guess my question is, so this all just kind of becomes a narrative background on this.
Right.
This is the meat of the project. This is the meat of really what we're trying to find out, project title,
Right.
plan, project implementation. My question is, should this be 2 times the scoring? Because this is really where we're finding out, are they prepared? Is this a good investment? And then, or should these all be given the same amount of, should this be on a 10-point scale essentially, and this on a 5-point scale? Because these are the auxiliary benefits, and this is the very project that we're working to fund. Is it well scoped? Is it realistic? Is this something that we think? Because I know, and again, maybe I just need to look up last year's scoring rubric, but there were different weights on certain criteria categories, which allowed it to get to 100. Because right now this isn't set up to get to 100, so there will be some tweaking just in terms to make it a nice whole number. But is the project implementation, is good direct answers on project implementation more important than good direct answers on community development? For the sake of awarding money, I would argue that making sure the project plan and project implementation are well thought out and realistic.
Therein lies when you have a newbie, a rookie, they may not be able to articulate as well as a pro writer.
Right.
And so I guess I would suggest is let them all be equal for now. See where you get this year. I really like the idea of coming back to this, and, score it and see what happens, and figure out where we're at. And then,
Or maybe you weight those 3 a little heavier just to get you to 100, but not double them. Right? That might be your way of getting to 100. But I agree. I think you could, this is an evolving process.
Oh, yeah.
Tweaking it as you go, and getting more experience on the ground.
Well, I think
our
letter
weighting,
weighting.
you need to put that in education. To
Right.
say these are weighted higher.
Yeah, and that would be made clear on this.
Yeah.
So say 2x project implementation, 2x project plan,
Yeah.
1x recreational benefit, 1x. community benefit.
So recreation, benefit, community development in the last category together total a max of 30 points. So you'd have 70 points to work with project implementation, project plan.
35 and 35, if you will.
No,
Yeah,
because we're only doing 10 for connectivity, mitigation, maintenance, max of 10. Community benefit has 10, recreational benefit is 10. So
I still like to see the community
Oh, I'm
development and economic, impact piece as, heavily weighted as well, so. I think that's huge to areas. That's how you sell these projects to these areas, is that they are going to help the local community. So I think community development ought to be heavily weighted. But again, I think that just brings me back to all equally.
Yeah.
Well, I think this conversation about leveling the playing field, I think it's started before this meeting, but it'll continue. I think that moves to down the line is when we do have a clear scope of what our funding is, and if we're holding on to additional tax revenues, do we then start a micro grant program?
Yeah.
That's more approachable and that walks people through the steps so that 2 years from now, after they get a $10,000 award, $15,000 award, they're ready for more competitive grant writing and grant projects.
We talked about it yesterday, but I can't remember the answer. Does TSP have a prevention clause that says you can't front money?
No, advance payments are available, advance awards are available, but I don't think 100%.
Right.
Advance.
Okay.
There's
And that's fine.
There's some sort of
Right.
trap door.
So
And
I
that's,
think that's something that should be, especially on those micro grants,
Yeah.
because you just don't have the money in these small places.
I like that,
Yeah.
yeah,
I love
doing a
it.
micro grant in the future, especially as you start to do this outreach. And
Mhm.
you can say, well, we're considering, and that kind of cues it up for people. Also as, you know, the state works on updating their state trails plan, it starts to plant seeds in these communities about envisioning future trails, and micro grant, again, another stepping stone, reducing the barriers, helping them get a design
If
established, you know.
we took 10% of the overall grant money, $160,000, and
Yeah.
get 16 micro grants available where you get $5,000 up front and 5 on completion.
Yeah.
I think you.
for certain projects that we know are 10% or less, and that we already know what they're gonna be purchasing.
Yeah, the 10 grand.
Yeah, we can
each,
advance
That's 10 grand
sustainable
each is the max.
Yeah.
And honestly, I mean, I agree with all of this, but even waiting to put that into the statewide trails grant, plan, we can't wait. I mean, the longer this is something that really needed to be up there a long time ago.
No, but can help.
It does help that,
As she,
but-
because she's gonna have to go over the next several years.
Yeah.
There's going to be an incredible amount of outreach to update the state trails
Yeah.
plan.
But what I'm saying is, I wouldn't even wait on this program to do it. I think it should be ASAP.
How are you thinking that they could maybe do this maybe next cycle even? Is that too soon or I just?
2024.
It's
Do we
possible.
have the ability to do this, to add micro grants? Is that something that can be done?
I think administrative rule writing for trail stewardship is still in progress, and so it's not out of the realm of possibility. And I think what we would need to do is run this cycle, like it, test out this new rubric, get it in, and then realize, is there money left over? And say there is 115,000 left over that was unawarded, or because of the additional tax revenue, money that's allocated. Then potentially there's the conversation of, okay, structurally, how do we build a micro grant? How do we then turn around and market it? So I think it would take probably 2 years to get going, potentially less. But there's nothing that says we cannot do that with the funding. It's just a matter of, can we get enough input and can we implement this based on what people need the money for? And does this align with long-term goals of XYZ? So I think today's and here on out it's something to think about and start building together kind of a scope of what a micro grant might look like, figuring out other examples that exist across the state and using that as something to base it off of. And then realizing what would these under 15, under 10,000 projects be? Trailhead improvements, what would that involve? Or signage, great, what would that involve? Bike repair stations along greenways and multi-use paths, great. We already have a pretty good example of that from Great Falls this year, under 5,000, they're gonna install 2. And that's gonna involve 1 invoice. They're gonna buy both of those and then get the labor to put them in, and then they're gonna send both of those invoices and send them back 4,900.
I think it's great too to have this idea of micro grants in mind as we go through and review grants this year and start to think about, oh, this would have been like the Great Falls project, this would have been a great micro grant. And if we offer micro grants, maybe we could get, Billings to apply for, fix-it
Well, it
stations
takes-
along their trails.
Big benefit, I think, is it takes that grant off the table
Yeah.
for this and streamlines it, and gets it out of this whole process where we're not having to score it through the rubric.
It would make for a more competitive grant program.
So,
And more approachable, which is ironic. It would make it more approachable and level the playing field, but then also for those 20,000 and above, it would make that a more competitive field.
so I have experienced really fast projects in Department of Commerce where money was available. All of a sudden, there were event grants available. Online applications are submittable. I don't think they had advisory. I don't know what sort of committee reviewed it, but I think it was internal.
Yeah.
And they were small. I don't want to say they were quick and dirty because there's no such thing, but at the same time, I don't know that that's something that the whole committee has to do. I think, maybe it's, I would say that I can't see any reason, maybe this is what we do the off season. Maybe these are projects that are, the call goes out August 1 of 2023, and
Yep.
they're fundable by October 1, something like that. Because at that point, do you have any rollover from FY 23?
Right.
And you're rolling it into the fall and you're popping those out there fast enough. And maybe those, can they become match for something bigger? Again, it's a seed, so do it opposite season. I'm a little frustrated hearing that something like this couldn't roll out until 2024. That just blows my mind.
Well, one thing to consider,
I
which
mean,
is a
we gotta go
caveat,
fast.
that's just in terms of like operational happenings, is that we will be spending a fair amount of time over the next 9 to 10 months switching from web grants to an alternative source. So in terms of agency internal capacity, that would be one thing that might slow down this process to 2024, because that's something that's kind of been in the works and will be rolling out and need to be tested. And so I think it's totally possible, but there is a capacity issue that's very much a real barrier that exists. So that would be one just caveat to slow it down. But I don't think that stops us from coming up with a project plan and an implementation plan. So when the time does present itself, we're able to strike it and everything's agreed upon and everything's well.
Lined up.
We don't have to start the planning then. It just might have to sit and wait until.
I honestly think that what we're hearing here, maybe we have to poll the whole committee. But I'm hearing the committee likes this.
Mhm.
Let's not drag our feet. Why can't we propose this and have it ready to plug in?
Cause they're, like, you mentioned submittable, that's what Flathead Electric uses to run it.
And I don't know, there's people in Congress, there's a way, I've seen it done,
Yeah.
okay? It wasn't in web grants.
Well, and then I think, and we're moving away from web grants and we're actually aligning with commerce and other state agencies, but I know that that's gonna be a bureaucratic process in and of itself. It's gonna take a little bit of time, but it's not to say that the improvements and advancement we make from a web grants platform to what our future platform is, it could be a pretty seamless transition into, great, we've now had a micro grant. We have the plan set, it's agreed upon by the staff, and we're just waiting until September of 23 to then.
I say let's start rolling on it. And it just so totally makes sense in so many ways. I don't see any disadvantage.
And I would say that in terms of my workload, I don't know if I could get to it, but I would encourage the staff to meet and provide a template of a project plan that says, here are some examples of how it's worked in other agencies. Here are some of the eligibility requirements. Here's how a potential application might look, one that's faster and would expedite the process. And here's a suggestion as to how the Access and Landowner Relations Bureau could review those in a fast manner that the stack approves, but the stack doesn't need to necessarily put eyes on it. We're just saying, here's the standard of review that we believe would be most appropriate for a micro grant program. And then, yeah, that then would provide us with the opportunity to say, once we have switched over to a new platform, and once we have vetted this year's application and scoring where we can make those changes, we can then move on to this and say, great, now we have this money left over for $20,000 below projects that kind of fit within these project areas, and go from there.
And I would also think that, I lost my thought. Oh, this would be something to add to like our earlier conversation about surveying.
Yep.
I mean, that's a whole piece that you can get some valuable feedback on.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we look at these project types, and right off the bat, I think we know that backcountry, it's not that it's not going to work, but it's going to be a small piece of a backcountry project. But if we look at trail signage, which we have a very low amount of total projects for at this point, maybe that's the perfect thing. Trail signage projects move into a micro grant, and then we start looking at project type trailhead improvements as well, and trying to figure out within this, what are the needs that are out there, and how do they align with a budget under 20,000? And then we can come up with a list that says, for your guidance within this program, projects that may be applicable are trail signage, trailhead improvement projects that involve X, Y, Z, workforce development projects that involve this amount of volunteer or employee hours and things like that.
So how much have we, I can't remember, there's been a lot of information. Do we know the estimate for a best guess for funds available for this next go round?
I believe if we look at last year was 1.47, it'll be at or higher than that more. And I think a lot of those details are still being worked on in offices outside of the agency. But I don't think it'll be less than 1.47.
So,
and should be going up, which I think allows not only a micro grant program to exist, but it allows us to say, well, where do we want to invest this? What do we think are the top priorities to invest this? And how do we want to go about encouraging? We have managed to cover a lot. I mean, in these 2 days. No, this was good.
Super helpful.
Anyone online, any things you want to bring up and touch upon or address?
No, thank you.
I'm good.
So, the overall process, I just would like just kind of a recap or clarification. Did we make a decision in terms of these will be internally scored? There'll be the scores and the grants will be handed over to the stack prior to public announcement. We will have input. You will make final award decisions and then go to public comment. Is that what we're deciding on?
So as the process from right here to next June, going to go back and make all of these adjustments based on the advisement of the stack. Then we're going to move into public outreach and targeted outreach. Technical assistance training will start in October. Application period opens November, closes January 1st. So February 1st, the applications will be taken in. And done in just an internal review to make sure that eligible projects are in. And then, for trail stewardship, the internal review team will be put together and given time to review and score. Then prior to the staff meeting next April, the staff will review and come to that meeting with their scores. Actually, I think, and Beth and Hope could correct me if I'm wrong, but I think before that award meeting in April, both the stack scores and the FWP internal scores will be combined to then create the master list, where then we come in and we review that master list and say, does this look right? What are we realizing? Are there red flags? Are there trends that are happening that we want to take into consideration? Are there projects that we believe were scored too highly or scored too low? What does that mean? How does this align with the money that we have? And then by the end of that meeting, similar to what happened this past April, there will be an in list and an out list. And I think we want to make sure that all of those projects that are out, we agree upon whether that was a technicality and they missed documentation or they just scored low, and are we okay with that? Also, just making sure that when we do go to those applicants that weren't scored, we can actually give them some constructive feedback based on everybody's score to say, we like your idea, we like the project, it was weak in these areas, we encourage you to work on this and come back next year with a stronger application. Please let us know if you have any other questions. And then following the stack review award meeting in April, then it would go out to public comment for 30 days where folks could express support or provide any input that they have. And then it would be codified and turned into awards out the door by June.
Okay.
That sounds right.
We have the same for RTP.
RTP is really similar, except for instead of you guys doing numeric scoring on RTP projects, it's the recommendation.
We're doing this, or this, right?
Yeah, and comments, and then there is like a third internal finalizing funding awards before it goes through the next process. So very similar, except for you're not doing numeric scoring, you're doing recommendations, comments.
You'll give us your rubric scores?
We will give you our
Okay.
numeric scoring.
Great, because that really helps, to understand why did this one come down low? It's like, if I can't see it, it's like, why is it low? So,
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm just looking at the calendar for next April. Because I'm hoping everyone's calendar is open, but it seems like we can look at the first full week of April potentially. And I'm wondering if a Tuesday meeting works better, a Wednesday meeting works better, but this is something that following this, I'll send out a hold so that we can have it on, because it would be, I know we're missing a few stack members this meeting, and that was just, we were very limited in the opening that we had for this, and we obviously have split it across 2 days, but ideally we can set this up next April so that everybody is here or able to zoom in, and it's a full day meeting that works with everyone's calendar. And so I guess we don't have to commit to anything right now, but I'm wondering, is there a day of the week that just works better for folks when we look?
I like this Tuesday, Wednesday, just because, it gives me Monday to, and if we came here Monday night.
I do that, full disclosure, the governor's conference is typically in April.
Okay.
Governor's Conference on Tourism, and that's typically a Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. And then I will also have the alternate, I'm thinking it would be the week of the 10th or the 17th. So that means that my full board meeting will either be the 12th or the 19th, and I can't really miss either one of those.
Okay.
I'm only one person, but.
And so, so it seems like, well, and also just for the sake of timing, we do want to do this early in the month, and it might also be a late March kind of thing. Could potentially.
Yeah, that first week in April is not, typically not governor's conference, but they don't have that date yet.
Anytime after the first week of April, we're then running into, because then we do have a 30-day public comment period, which is kind of a stall, and we do want to get these contracts out the door by June 1, really, if not.
What about the last week of March?
I just wonder if school vacation would present an issue. I don't know when March break either. But
3rd, 4th, 5th is pretty safe from the governor's conference, but I did put out a question yesterday, but
Hopefully it won't interrupt Easter again.
yeah, that was
That was
really-
odd.
Well, it's because it got moved 2 years in a row because of the pandemic
I
and
know.
Easter moves. And
Easter's 9th.
they got on the governor's calendar and after that, they went, too bad. So that's the governor when the tourism conference, is gonna be all work around that.
Are we doing our RTP reviews in that same meeting?
I was gonna ask you guys that same question, if that made sense, and then how much time do we think we need to
Oh my
do both
gosh.
programs?
Well, I've enjoyed it in the past being in person.
Yeah.
I like it in person.
And I am more than willing to spend an extra day here to handle RTP on another day, so.
Well, which one comes first then? Does it matter?
I don't know if it does.
Well, which would take longer. We don't even
I feel like
know.
This will
yours,
take
because
longer.
they're actually doing numeric scoring,
Right,
that might take more rummaging
so it could be a day and a half.
for your stuff.
Well, one day for trail stewardship and then the next morning for RTP.
Yeah,
I would just say the next day, I wouldn't worry about trying to fit, if you can block the day. If we get done in a half a day, fine.
I like that idea, just at least.
Give
not
us
you, and I
time.
have no
The
idea.
minute we try to compress, this happened 2 years ago, we compressed and it ended badly. I'm
We need
just,
plenty of room for breaks.
exactly.
So really, it sounds like, and folks online, please provide any dates that are in or out, but it looks like I will try and identify when the governor's conference for tourism is and then schedule it either before or after that so that we avoid any conflicts there.
Oh, that's what I meant.
And
I will
Easter,
have
we'll
my
wait.
board meeting too, because that has to, that's when I do my budget proposal.
And it's in
They have to have-
conjunction with the governors.
No, but what always happens, the governor's conference is always in April. And I always have a board meeting for my next fiscal year budget proposal and acceptance or approval in April, opposite week of the governor's conference.
So then we'll shoot for the last week of March.
I think the first week of April will be clear, but again, I'm only one member of this
Okay.
committee.
I have a standing meeting the last Tuesday of every month.
And is that in a fixed location or? so that would be
Yeah,
the 20
it's the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee. So it's the last Tuesday of every month.
Well, you can send out one of those
Okay.
poll things with
Yeah.
the calendars.
Yeah, so thank you, Christy. And with that in mind, then potentially a Wednesday, Thursday meeting, March 29th and March 30th here could work.
Sure, yeah, that would work for me.
Okay. So I'll do a little bit of looking up, but I would love to just get that on the calendar so we don't have any issues like we did for this week. I felt bad that some folks were left out and it's a tough time of year anyways, this first day of school. I know that limited some folks, but all right, we'll look for that last Thursday of the month of March 2020.
sounds good.
Great.
You need to open this to public comment.
Thank you.
I was gonna say,
And with that being said, here
we're opening up for
Uh,
public comment.
12:07, we would like to open the floor up to public comment for anybody that is listening. And Jen, you can help me out if there's anything else that needs to be said.
If there's anyone who wishes to make public comment, if you could please raise your hand at this time. And when you comment, please state your name and spell your last name. Any commenters? There appear to be none.
Thank you, Jen. And we'll just, I think we're ready to adjourn, but if anyone has any last things to say, this would be the time. Otherwise, I want to thank everybody. This has been a really productive 2 days and look forward to getting this finalized, the application and scoring criteria, and then moving into the 2023 cycle.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
You guys were hosting.
Working hard.
Thanks, have a great day, y'all.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Take care.
It's on me.
There's none. Will you just speak over?
Thank you, everyone.